The wine glass slipped from Vivian's trembling fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor of their Chicago kitchen as she stared at the phone screen. The sound echoed through their empty townhouse like a gunshot, but it was nothing compared to the explosion happening inside her chest. "Can't wait to sail away with you tomorrow, my darling. Suite 412, our little paradise. Pack that emerald dress I bought you. I want to watch you take it off while we toast our freedom under the Caribbean stars. All my love, Jay." The text wasn't meant for her. It was meant for her. For Diana. Her husband of 15 years had sent it to the wrong contact by mistake. After all these months of carefully orchestrated lies, all these perfectly crafted excuses about medical conferences and weekend seminars, he had finally slipped up. One tiny mistake that tore apart everything Vivian thought she knew about her life. She sank to her knees among the glittering shards of glass, her cream silk blouse soaking up the spilled Merlot. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been celebrating just 40 minutes ago. She had been dancing around this very kitchen, wine in hand, toasting her husband's professional achievement that was supposedly taking him on a luxury research cruise to the Bahamas. She had been so proud of him, so supportive, even helping him pack his medical journals with the same hands that now shook with rage. The house felt different now. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows grew deeper, and every wedding photo lining the stairway seemed to mock her with their frozen smiles. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of building a life together. 15 years of trust that had just been incinerated by 28 words on a phone screen. But as she knelt there among the broken glass, something else began to bloom in her chest alongside the pain. Something cold and calculating. Something that whispered promises of justice in the dark corners of her mind. Because she knew something her dear husband didn't. She knew exactly who Diana was. And more importantly, she knew her husband. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from, and if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales to life. Enjoy listening. Her name was Vivian Palmer, and until 7 hours ago, she thought she was living a perfect life. She had been the ideal wife, the kind of woman who had dinner ready at exactly 7 every evening, who remembered every anniversary and birthday, who supported every dream and ambition. She had given up her own career as a pediatric nurse to build their home, to be the foundation that allowed Jonathan to climb higher and higher in his cardiology practice. Their townhouse on Maple Street was a testament to that sacrifice. Every room was perfectly decorated, every surface spotless, every detail carefully curated to reflect the successful life they had built together. The neighbors often commented on how lucky Jonathan was to have found such a devoted wife. She had taken pride in those comments once. Now they felt like epitaphs carved on a tombstone. She picked herself up from the kitchen floor, brushing glass from her blouse with mechanical precision. Her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator showed a woman she barely recognized. Mascara streaked down hollow cheeks, auburn hair disheveled, hazel eyes wild with a mixture of hurt and something darker. The phone buzzed again in her hand. Another message, this time meant for her. "Hey sweetheart, just boarding now. The ship is incredible. Wish you could see it. Love you." The casual cruelty of it took her breath away. He was standing on that ship, probably looking right at her, and had the audacity to send her a loving message. The same fingers that had just texted his mistress about their secret paradise were now typing words of love to the wife he was betraying. She set the phone down carefully on the counter and walked to their home office. Jonathan's laptop sat open, still logged in. In all their years of marriage, she had never violated his privacy. She had trusted him completely. That trust died as she clicked through his browser history. Caribbean cruise bookings. Hotel reservations in Fort Lauderdale. Restaurant reservations for 2 under false names. And then she found the photos, dozens of them hidden in a folder marked patient files. Jonathan and a stunning redhead woman laughing over candlelit dinners, walking hand in hand through Lincoln Park, kissing passionately in what looked like a hotel room. Diana Sweeney. She recognized her now from the hospital's charity gala last year. Jonathan had introduced her as just a colleague when Vivian had noticed them talking intently by the silent auction table. She was a pharmaceutical sales rep for the company that supplied Jonathan's practice. Married, 2 children, a husband who worked as an investment banker downtown. Robert Sweeney. Her hands moved across the keyboard with newfound purpose. Within an hour, she had gathered everything she needed to know about the Sweeney family. their address on the North Shore, Robert's work schedule, Diana's travel patterns, even their children's school schedules. But most importantly, she discovered something that made her heart race with dark possibility. Robert Sweeney was scheduled to attend a finance summit in Miami this week, the same dates as Jonathan's medical cruise, the same dates as the ship's departure. A plan began to form in her mind, as clear and sharp as the broken glass she had swept up from her kitchen floor. Sweeney and associates occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming downtown tower, but Vivian navigated its corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged. She had dressed carefully for this encounter, a simple black dress, minimal makeup, an expression of concerned vulnerability that would appeal to a businessman's instincts. Robert Sweeney was exactly what she had expected from his online profiles. Tall, distinguished with dark hair and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. He looked up from his financial reports when she knocked on his office door, and she saw immediately why Diana might have thought she could fool him. He had the trusting face of a man who believed in the goodness of people. "Mr. Sweeney, I'm so sorry to bother you. My name is Vivian Palmer. I believe you know my husband, Dr. Jonathan Palmer. He works with your wife at Meridian Pharmaceuticals." The recognition flickered in his eyes, followed quickly by polite confusion. "Of course. Yes, Jonathan is an excellent physician. Is everything all right?" She let her voice crack just slightly. "I was hoping you might help me understand something. You see, Jonathan told me he was going on a medical cruise this week, but when I called his practice, they said Diana was also out of town. I'm probably being silly, but..." The color drained from Robert's face. "Diana told me she was attending a conference in Denver." "Perhaps I'm mistaken," she said quickly, watching his expression carefully. "I'm sure there's a perfectly innocent explanation. It's just that I found some things on Jonathan's computer, and I'm starting to worry that maybe..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Robert's analytical mind was already connecting the dots, his training in pattern recognition working against him as he recognized the symptoms of betrayal. "What kind of things?" His voice was steady, but she could see his hands trembling slightly. She pulled out a folder she had prepared. Printouts of the hotel reservations, the cruise booking, some of the more innocent photos. Nothing too explicit, just enough to plant the seed of doubt. Robert studied the documents with the same methodical attention he probably gave to investment portfolios. She watched his face change as the evidence mounted, saw the moment when his world tilted off its axis, just as hers had. "There's more," she said softly. "The cruise they're on together. It leaves from Fort Lauderdale tomorrow morning. The Ocean Majesty, 7-day Caribbean itinerary." He looked up at her then, and she saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. "You're certain about this?" "I wish I wasn't." They sat in silence for a long moment. Two people who had just discovered that their marriages were built on lies. But where she had already moved past the initial shock into something darker, Robert was still processing the betrayal. "What do we do?" he asked finally. "I have an idea," she said. "But I'll need your help." Robert's penthouse apartment overlooked Lake Michigan, a testament to his success as one of Chicago's most prominent investment advisors. They sat in his living room, surrounded by photos of the family life that Diana was casually destroying with her affair. Pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, graduations. A lifetime of memories that now felt tainted. "You want us to go to Florida?" Robert said slowly, turning the cruise itinerary over in his hands. "To confront them on the ship." "Not confront," she corrected. "Surprise them. Think about it, Robert. They think they're safe on that ship. They think they've covered their tracks perfectly. They have no idea that we know." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Imagine their faces when they see us, when they realize that their perfect little secret has been exposed in the most public way possible." Robert set down the papers and walked to the window, staring out at the city where his wife was probably packing for her romantic getaway. "This feels like revenge." "It is revenge," she said simply. "They deserve to face the consequences of what they've done. They deserve to feel the same shock and humiliation that we're feeling right now. Your children will be better off knowing the truth about their mother, just like I'm better off knowing the truth about Jonathan." She stood and joined him at the window. "Look, Robert, I understand if this is too much for you. I can go alone. But think about what they're planning. 7 days on a luxury cruise, laughing about how cleverly they've deceived us. 7 days of believing they've gotten away with it." His reflection in the window showed a man wrestling with his conscience. "How would we even get on the ship? The cruise sold out months ago. She smiled, and for the first time since discovering the affair, she felt something approaching satisfaction. Leave that to me. I still have connections from my nursing days, and money can solve most problems, especially when you're dealing with a cruise line that wants to avoid bad publicity. Bad publicity? Think about it. A cheating wife and her lover surprised by their spouses on a luxury cruise. That's the kind of story that goes viral. The kind of story that makes people think twice about booking their own romantic getaways. Cruise lines will pay a lot to keep that kind of scandal quiet. Robert turned to look at her directly, and she saw something new in his expression. Not just hurt, but a flicker of the same cold fire that was burning in her chest. What exactly are you planning, Vivian? She walked back to the couch and opened her laptop, showing him the research she had done. The Ocean Majesty has a formal captain's dinner on the 4th night, black tie event, all passengers invited. Diana and Jonathan will be there, probably sitting at some romantic table playing the perfect couple. And that's when we make our entrance, together, as a couple ourselves. The implications hung in the air between them. Robert's face went through a series of expressions: shock, consideration, and finally, something that looked like grim determination. They'll think we're having an affair ourselves. Let them. Let them experience the confusion, the doubt, the sick feeling in their stomachs when they can't quite figure out what's happening. Let them wonder if their spouses are capable of betrayal. She closed the laptop and looked at him seriously. Robert, I'm not asking you to actually have an affair with me, but I am asking you to help me show them what it feels like to have their world turned upside down, to make them face the consequences of their choices in the most dramatic way possible. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos of his family. Finally, he spoke. When do we leave? The Miami heat hit them like a wall as they stepped out of the airport, but it was nothing compared to the fire burning in Vivian's chest. Robert and she made an oddly compelling pair. The grieving investment advisor and the betrayed wife united in their mission of justice. They had booked a suite at the Ritz-Carlton, the same hotel where Jonathan and Diana were staying before boarding their ship. Vivian had confirmed their reservation through a combination of social engineering and pure determination. The concierge at the front desk had been surprisingly helpful once she explained that she was planning a surprise for her husband. Are you sure about this? Robert asked as they checked into their room. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Two married people sharing a hotel suite, just like the couple they were pursuing. It's too late for second thoughts, she replied, pulling out the elegant navy dress she had packed for tomorrow night's captain's dinner. Besides, you were the one who suggested we actually go through with boarding the ship. That had been Robert's contribution to the plan. Initially, she had thought they would simply confront them at the port, but he had made a compelling argument for taking things further. If we really want them to understand what they've put us through, he had said, we need to let them experience the full paranoia of discovery. Let them spend days wondering what we know, what we're planning. He had used his financial connections to secure them a last-minute cabin on the Ocean Majesty. Apparently, there was always space available for a prominent investment advisor and his wife who needed a sudden vacation for health reasons. Their suite at the hotel was opulent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, a marble bathroom larger than most people's bedrooms, a living area decorated in shades of ivory and gold. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like a war room. Vivian spread Jonathan's cruise itinerary across the coffee table, marking key locations and times. They're planning to board at 1:30 tomorrow. The ship doesn't leave until 5, so they'll have time to settle in, maybe explore a bit. We board at 3:45, late enough that they'll already be comfortable, early enough that we can establish ourselves before dinner. She looked up at him. Remember, as far as anyone on that ship knows, we're Mr. and Mrs. Sweeney, taking a romantic cruise to reconnect after a difficult period in our marriage. Robert nodded grimly. And when we encounter them, we play it by ear. But remember, we're not confronting them directly. We're just existing in their space, letting them draw their own conclusions about what that means. The plan was deliberately vague because Vivian wanted to preserve the element of spontaneity. Too much planning would make it feel rehearsed, artificial. The beauty of revenge is that it works best when it feels natural, inevitable. That evening they had dinner at Joe's Stone Crab, a Miami institution that Vivian knew Jonathan had always wanted to try. She had deliberately chosen a restaurant where they might encounter the cheating couple, but Jonathan and Diana were nowhere to be seen. Probably dining in their hotel room, too wrapped up in each other to venture out. Tell me about your children, she said to Robert as they shared a bottle of wine. His face softened. Emma is 14, all attitude and ambition like her mother. She wants to be a lawyer, which terrifies me because she'll probably be brilliant at it. Jake is 10, quieter, more analytical. He's fascinated by numbers, wants to understand how everything works. They don't know about any of this? No, and I hope they never have to. That's part of why I'm here with you. Instead of filing for divorce immediately, I need to understand what Diana was thinking, what she was planning, whether this was just physical or if she was ready to leave our family entirely. Vivian glanced around the restaurant, imagining Jonathan and Diana in some intimate setting, planning their perfect week together. What will you do if it's the latter? I honestly don't know, Robert admitted. What about you? Will you leave Jonathan? The question hung in the air between them. Vivian realized she hadn't actually thought beyond this cruise, beyond the immediate satisfaction of disrupting their perfect romantic getaway. I don't know either, she said finally. The Vivian who existed a week ago would have tried to work things out, would have gone to marriage counseling, would have blamed herself for not being enough. But that Vivian was living a lie. She paused, swirling her wine. This Vivian is still figuring out who she is. After dinner, they walked along South Beach, the neon lights reflecting off the water, couples strolling hand in hand along the shoreline. What was your marriage like? Robert asked. Before you found out about the affair. Vivian considered the question. I thought it was perfect. Jonathan was everything I believed I wanted, successful, handsome, respected. I supported his career completely, gave up my own dreams to be the wife he needed. And now I realize that Jonathan never really saw me. He saw a role I was playing, the devoted wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who made his life easier. But the real me? My thoughts, my dreams, my needs? I don't think he ever bothered to discover those things. Robert stopped walking and turned to face her. What were your dreams? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. I wanted to travel. Not just vacation trips, but real travel, volunteering with medical organizations overseas, using my nursing skills to help people who really needed it. I wanted to see the world, make a difference. Jonathan didn't support that. Jonathan needed me to be available for his career. Hospital galas, medical conferences, entertaining colleagues. He said we could travel later, after he made partner, after he established his practice. There was always a reason to wait. They resumed walking, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and possibility. What about you? She asked. What did you give up for Diana? Robert was quiet for a moment. Time with my kids. I worked 60-hour weeks to build our lifestyle, to give Diana everything she said she wanted. The house, the cars, the private schools. I missed baseball games and school plays because I thought providing financially was the same as providing emotionally. Do you regret it? I regret that it wasn't enough. That despite everything I sacrificed, Diana still went looking for something else, someone else. They reached the end of the beach and turned back toward the hotel. The Miami skyline glittered like a handful of diamonds scattered across black velvet, beautiful and cold. Robert, Vivian said as they approached the Ritz-Carlton. I want you to know that whatever happens on this cruise, meeting you has been the only good thing to come out of this nightmare. Even though we're both planning elaborate psychological warfare against our own spouses? She laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh she'd managed since discovering Jonathan's betrayal. Especially because of that. It means we're not going to be victims. We're going to be survivors. The next morning brought crystal clear skies and a sense of anticipation that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Vivian stood on their hotel balcony, watching the massive cruise ships anchored in the port, knowing that in a few hours they would be aboard one of those floating cities, beginning the most audacious plan either of them had ever attempted. Robert emerged from the bathroom, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt, looking every bit the successful businessman taking a relaxing vacation with his wife. Ready for this? He asked, joining her on the balcony. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. They arrived at the cruise terminal to find chaos. Thousands of passengers checking in, saying goodbye to family members, the excitement of vacation beginning mixing with the logistical nightmare of boarding such a massive ship. Vivian scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces. There, Robert said quietly, nodding toward a check-in counter across the terminal. Jonathan and Diana stood together, laughing about something, looking like the picture-perfect couple. Jonathan's hand rested possessively on the small of Diana's back, and she leaned into him with the comfortable intimacy of lovers. Vivian's chest tightened at the sight. For 15 years, she had been the woman Jonathan touched that way, looked at that way. Now she was watching him lavish that same attention on another woman, in public, without shame or hesitation. "Breathe," Robert said quietly, placing his hand on her arm. "Remember, we're not here to fall apart. We're here to make them fall apart." Diana looked stunning in a white sundress that emphasized her red hair and porcelain skin. She moved with the confidence of a woman who believed she was getting away with something, who thought she was smarter than everyone around her. Jonathan appeared younger than his 43 years, animated in a way Vivian hadn't seen in months. This was how he looked when he was truly happy, when he felt alive and excited about life. He had never looked at her that way. The realization hit her like a physical blow. In all their years together, Jonathan had never been as animated, as genuinely joyful with her as he was with his mistress. "They look happy," she said, hating the way her voice cracked. "They look smug," Robert corrected. "There's a difference. Happy people don't need to sneak around and lie to everyone they supposedly love." Their own check-in process went smoothly. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Sweeney, celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary with a romantic Caribbean getaway. The cruise staff were effusive in their congratulations, offering champagne and upgrade incentives. By the time they boarded the Ocean Majesty, Vivian had slipped completely into her role. She was no longer Vivian Palmer, the betrayed wife seeking revenge. She was Mrs. Sweeney, a woman rekindling romance with her devoted husband. The ship was magnificent, 12 decks of restaurants, shops, entertainment venues, and amenities that rivaled the finest resorts. Their cabin was modest but comfortable, with a small balcony overlooking the ocean. "Now what?" Robert asked, settling their luggage in the closet. Vivian pulled out the ship's daily schedule, studying the activities and dining options. "Now we make ourselves visible. The pool deck, the main dining room, anywhere they're likely to be. We want them to see us, to start wondering what we're doing here." She looked at him seriously. Robert, from this point forward, were a couple. A married couple who's very much in love. "Can you do that?" He studied her face for a moment. "Vivian, I need you to know something. This started as revenge, but spending time with you these past 2 days, you're remarkable. Intelligent, brave, funny. Jonathan is a fool for not seeing that." The compliment caught her off guard, warming something inside her that had been cold for months. "Thank you. You're not what I expected either. Diana described you as boring, obsessed with work. But you're thoughtful and kind, and you actually listen when people talk." They stood there in their small cabin, two people who had been strangers a week ago, now bound together by shared betrayal and a plan that was rapidly becoming something more complex than simple revenge. "So," Robert said, offering her his arm. "Shall we go make some appearances, Mrs. Sweeney?" Vivian smiled and took his arm. "Lead the way, darling." The pool deck was crowded with passengers settling into their vacation routines. Families with children claimed space near the shallow end, while couples staked out prime sunbathing territory. Vivian had changed into a sophisticated one-piece swimsuit, elegant rather than revealing, paired with a flowing cover-up that suggested confidence without desperation. She and Robert found chairs with perfect visibility from all angles, and he dutifully applied sunscreen to her shoulders and back with an intimacy that suggested long familiarity with her body. Jonathan and Diana appeared 20 minutes later. Diana wore a barely there bikini that would have been more appropriate for a private beach than a family cruise. Jonathan seemed to approve, his eyes never leaving her as she arranged herself on a lounge chair like a piece of art on display. They took chairs on the opposite side of the pool, but Vivian could feel their presence like a change in atmospheric pressure. "They're here," she murmured to Robert. "I see them. Remember, we're just enjoying our vacation." Robert stood and offered her his hand. "Swim with me?" Vivian let him help her up, removing her cover-up with deliberate grace. She had always been proud of her figure, but 15 years of marriage had made her modest, self-conscious. Now, under the warm Miami sun, she felt beautiful again. The pool was refreshing, and they found a quiet corner where they could play like lovers. Robert lifted her in the water, spinning her around while she laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck. To any observer, they looked like a couple celebrating a renewed romance. But something strange was happening. The performance was becoming real. Robert's hands on her waist felt natural, protective. His smile when he looked at her was genuine, not calculated. When he pulled her close in the water, she found herself responding to his nearness in ways that had nothing to do with their revenge plot. Vivian, he said quietly, his hands still on her waist as they treaded water together. I know, she whispered back. I feel it too. This is more complicated than we planned. Everything worthwhile is complicated. They were interrupted by a splash nearby. A child had dropped a beach ball, and as Robert swam over to retrieve it, Vivian looked up to see Diana standing at the edge of the pool, staring down at her with undisguised hostility. Enjoying yourself? Diana asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Vivian floated on her back, completely relaxed. I'm having a wonderful time, thank you. The water's perfect. I'm sure it is. Diana's eyes narrowed. You know, I've heard so much about you from Jonathan. He always said you were predictable. The barb was meant to hurt, and it did. But Vivian had learned something about herself over the past few days. She was capable of much more than anyone, including herself, had imagined. People change, she said, swimming closer to the pool's edge. Sometimes they surprise you. Is that what you're doing? Surprising people? I'm surprising myself, Vivian replied honestly. Diana's expression faltered slightly, as if she had expected anger or defensiveness, and didn't know what to do with calm confidence. Diana. Robert's voice cut through the tension as he swam back with the rescued ball. I didn't see you there. The confrontation Vivian had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure was finally happening. Robert handed the ball to its young owner and pulled himself out of the pool, water streaming from his athletic frame. Hello, Robert. Diana's voice was softer now, uncertain. You look good. Thank you. His tone was polite but distant, the way you might speak to a professional acquaintance. Robert, we need to talk. Please. I don't think we do. The pain in Diana's eyes was real, and for a moment Vivian almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The children miss you, Diana said desperately. Emma keeps asking when you're coming home. I'll be home Sunday, Robert said. We'll talk then. And until then, you're just going to, what? Play house with her. The venom in her voice when she said her was unmistakable. Vivian pulled herself out of the pool and walked over to stand beside Robert, water dripping from her swimsuit. We're not playing anything, she said quietly. We're just two people who found each other at the right moment. The right moment? Diana repeated. How convenient. More convenient than secret hotel rooms and cruise ship trysts with other people's husbands. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Diana's face went through several expressions before settling on cold fury. You don't know anything about my marriage. I know enough. Jonathan appeared then, walking quickly across the pool deck toward them. He looked terrible, unshaven, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his resort wear wrinkled as if he had slept in it. Vivian, he said, slightly out of breath. We need to talk. Now. Vivian looked at her husband, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a distant sadness for the man she had once loved so completely. No, she said simply. We don't. Vivian, please, Jonathan said, his voice carrying across the pool deck. This isn't what it looks like. She almost laughed at the absurdity of it. It looks like you're on a romantic cruise with another man's wife. What exactly should it look like? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Vivian reached for her towel, wrapping it around herself with deliberate calm. I understand that you've been lying to me for months. I understand that you think I'm stupid enough to believe whatever explanation you're about to give me. And I understand that you're more upset about being caught than you are about hurting me. Jonathan's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the young resident she had married 16 years ago, vulnerable and lost. Vivian, I love you. I've always loved you. No, she said, and the certainty in her own voice surprised her. You love the idea of me. You love having a wife who asks no questions, makes no demands, causes no trouble. But you don't love me, Jonathan. You don't even know me. That's not true. What's my favorite book, Jonathan? The question came out of nowhere, but it felt important. Jonathan opened his mouth, then closed it, confusion flickering across his features. Jane Eyre, he said finally, uncertainty clear in his voice. Wuthering Heights, she said quietly. It's been Wuthering Heights for 20 years. You gave me a copy on our third date, but you never asked if I actually read it. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert moved closer to her, not touching, but offering his presence as support. Diana looked between them all with growing panic, clearly realizing that her affair was destroying much more than she had anticipated. Vivian, Jonathan tried again, but she held up her hand. I'm going to get dressed, she said. Robert and I have shore excursion plans. Shore excursion? Diana's voice cracked slightly. Nassau, Robert said smoothly. Vivian's always wanted to see the botanical gardens at Ardastra. I thought it would be romantic. It was a lie, of course. They had no such plans, but the implication was clear. While Jonathan and Diana had been planning their romantic escape, Vivian and Robert were building something deeper, more meaningful. As they walked away, Vivian heard Diana hiss at Jonathan, "Do something. They're making us look like fools." But Jonathan didn't respond. He just stood there, watching Vivian leave with another man, finally understanding that the woman who had waited for him every evening with dinner ready and a smile prepared was gone forever. The tender boat that carried them from the Ocean Majesty to the port of Nassau was crowded with excited tourists, but Vivian and Robert sat in comfortable silence, watching the Bahamas grow larger as they approached. The morning's confrontation had drained them both, leaving behind a strange mix of satisfaction and emotional exhaustion. "Did we go too far?" Robert asked as they disembarked onto the busy pier. "Which part? The public humiliation or the fact that we're starting to care about each other?" "Both." Vivian considered the question as they made their way through the crowds of vendors and tour guides competing for tourist attention. "I don't think we went far enough." Robert looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean they're still together. They're still on that ship, probably comforting each other, telling themselves that we're the villains in this story. They haven't faced any real consequences yet. Vivian, I think, that this has gone beyond justice, into something darker. But I can't stop now, Robert. I won't let them walk away from this thinking they can just outlast our anger." They found themselves at a small cafe overlooking the turquoise harbor, surrounded by the bustling energy of island life. Robert ordered 2 rum punches, and they sat watching the cruise ships anchored in the harbor like floating cities. "Tell me what you're really thinking," she said. Robert was quiet for a long moment, turning his glass in his hands. "I'm thinking that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Diana and Jonathan. What's it about then? You and me." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. He was right, of course. What had started as a calculated revenge plot had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. "Is that a problem?" she asked. "I don't know. 3 days ago, I was a happily married man with a successful practice and 2 children I adore. Now I'm sitting on a Caribbean island with another man's wife, plotting elaborate psychological warfare against my own spouse. And how does that feel?" "Terrifying," he admitted, "and more alive than I've felt in years." Vivian reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "Robert, whatever happens after this cruise, I want you to know that meeting you has been the best thing to come out of this nightmare. Even though I'm helping you destroy your marriage, my marriage was already destroyed. You're helping me find myself." They spent the afternoon exploring Nassau, visiting the historic forts that had once protected the harbor from pirates. There was something fitting about standing among the ruins of defensive walls, looking out at the ocean where modern-day pirates in expensive suits were currently trying to steal each other's happiness. The Bahamians believed in poetic justice, Robert said as they climbed the steps of Fort Fincastle. The idea that the universe eventually balances the scales, that people get what they deserve. "Do you believe that?" "Sometimes. Don't you think every generation has people who think they're the first to experience love and betrayal and revenge?" "Maybe. But that doesn't make our pain less real." At the top of the fort, they could see for miles in every direction, Nassau stretching out below them, the Atlantic Ocean spreading endlessly toward the horizon, and in the distance, the white shape of their cruise ship, waiting to carry them back into the drama they had created. "What happens tonight?" Robert asked. "Tonight is the welcome aboard dinner. Assigned seating, formal introductions, no way to avoid each other." She smiled, and she could feel the edge in it. "Tonight, we establish ourselves as the couple everyone wants to know." Preparing for the welcome aboard dinner felt like donning armor for battle. Vivian had chosen her outfit carefully, a deep emerald cocktail dress that brought out her hazel eyes and complemented her auburn hair, paired with the pearl necklace that had been her grandmother's. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup applied with the precision of a diplomat preparing for delicate negotiations. Robert stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his navy blazer with the kind of masculine confidence that made formal wear look effortless. He had transformed from the stunned, hurt husband she had met 5 days ago into someone who commanded attention and respect. "Ready?" he asked, offering her his arm. More than ready. The main dining room had been decorated for the occasion. Fresh orchids adorned every table. Servers moved through the space in crisp whites, and guests filled the room with the cheerful energy of vacation beginning. The maitre d' led them to table 8, perfectly positioned in the center of the room where they would be visible from all angles. Vivian had specifically requested this arrangement through a combination of charm and a generous tip. Jonathan and Diana were seated at table 12, close enough to observe, but far enough away to maintain the mystique. They looked miserable. Despite their elegant attire, both appeared haggard. They weren't touching, weren't laughing, weren't even looking at each other. The romantic cruise they had planned was turning into a nightmare of suspicion and paranoia. "Good evening," said the woman to Vivian's left, a cheerful grandmother from Ohio. "I'm Martha, and this is my husband, Harold. Are you two celebrating anything special?" "Our 15th anniversary," Vivian replied smoothly. 20 years together. The lie came easily. She was becoming someone who could create fictional realities as needed, and she found she liked this version of herself. "How wonderful," Martha agreed. "Harold and I are celebrating our 50th. Any advice for the younger couple?" Robert fielded this one with surprising grace. "Trust and communication," he said, his eyes meeting Vivian's across the table. "Never take each other for granted." "Wise words," Harold nodded. "You two seem very much in love." "We are," Vivian said, and realized it wasn't entirely a lie anymore. The dinner proceeded through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Vivian and Robert played their parts perfectly, the devoted couple reconnecting after some unspecified difficulty. They shared food from each other's plates, laughed at private jokes, touched each other frequently but appropriately. She could feel Jonathan watching them throughout the meal, his attention like a weight across her shoulders. Every affectionate gesture between Robert and her seemed to cause him physical pain. During the second course, Diana excused herself to the restroom. Vivian waited 5 minutes, then followed. The ladies' room was elegant, all marble and brass fixtures, with a sitting area where Diana had collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. "Rough evening?" Vivian asked conversationally, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. Diana looked up, her eyes red-rimmed despite her perfect makeup. "What do you want, Vivian?" "Nothing from you," she replied honestly. "I already have everything I need. You think you're so clever, don't you? Showing up here with my husband, making a fool of me?" "I'm not making a fool of you, Diana. You did that yourself when you decided to have an affair with my husband. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You thought you could have it all, the successful career, the perfect family, and the exciting affair on the side. You thought you were smarter than everyone else, more deserving of happiness." Diana stood, her hands clenched into fists. "You know nothing about my marriage. I know your husband is a good man who deserves better than a wife who lies to him every day. And Jonathan? What about what he deserves? Jonathan deserves exactly what he's getting, the consequences of his choices. You're destroying 2 families." "No," Vivian said, capping her lipstick and turning to face her directly. "You and Jonathan destroyed 2 families. Robert and I are just refusing to pretend otherwise." Diana's composure finally cracked. "I love him," she said desperately. "I love Jonathan and he loves me. What we have is real. Then why are you here? Why are you so upset about what your husband and I are doing together? If what you have with Jonathan is so real, so meaningful, why does it matter what Robert and I feel for each other?" She couldn't answer that because they both knew the truth. Her affair with Jonathan was built on fantasy, on the thrill of the forbidden, on the excitement of getting away with something. It couldn't survive in the real world, under scrutiny, when faced with actual consequences. "Stay away from my husband," Diana said finally. "Or what? Or I'll tell him what you're really doing, that this is all an act, a revenge plot." Vivian smiled, and this time there was nothing cold or calculated about it. It was pure, genuine amusement. "Go ahead," she said. "Tell him. But you might want to ask yourself this first. What if it's not an act anymore? What if Robert and I have found something real together? What if we've discovered that we're actually compatible, actually happy?" The color drained from Diana's face as the implications hit her. "You see?" Vivian continued. "The beautiful thing about revenge is that sometimes it gives you exactly what you didn't know you were looking for." She left Diana there in the marble bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had lost. When Vivian returned to the dining room, dessert was being served, an elaborate chocolate soufflé that should have been the highlight of the evening. But she was focused on Jonathan, who looked like he was about to explode from the tension. "Everything all right?" Robert asked quietly as she took her seat. Perfect, she replied, placing her hand over his on the table. The gesture was small, but she saw Jonathan flinch as if she had struck him. For 15 years, she had been his possession, his constant, his given. The idea that she might choose someone else, might be happier with someone else, was clearly unbearable to him. After dinner, the captain invited all guests to the observation lounge for dancing. The room was softly lit with a 12-piece orchestra playing classic standards. Couples moved across the polished floor like shadows, and the whole scene had a dreamlike quality that made anything seem possible. "Dance with me," Robert said, extending his hand. This time there was no hesitation. She followed him onto the dance floor and melted into his arms as if they had been dancing together for decades. The music was "The Way You Look Tonight," and the irony wasn't lost on her. "Vivian," Robert murmured as they swayed together. "There's something I need to tell you." "What?" "This morning, while you were getting ready, I called my lawyer." She pulled back slightly to look at his face. "About the divorce?" "About the divorce. I can't go back to pretending, Vivian. I can't look at Diana every day, knowing what she's capable of, what she's willing to sacrifice for her own pleasure. And the children? They'll adjust. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for, and they deserve parents who are honest with them." They continued dancing as she processed this information. Robert was serious about ending his marriage. This wasn't just a dramatic gesture or a threat designed to bring Diana to heel. He was actually prepared to blow up his entire life based on what had happened between them over the past few days. "Robert," she said carefully, "you realize this is moving very fast. I know what you're thinking, that this is too fast, too dramatic. But Vivian, I've been married to Diana for 16 years, and I've never felt about her the way I feel about you right now. How do you feel about me? Like I'm seeing color for the first time after years of living in black and white." The music changed to something slower, more intimate, and Robert pulled her closer. She was aware of other couples around them, but they seemed to fade into background noise. There was only the music, the movement, and the feeling of being exactly where she belonged. "Vivian, look at me." She lifted her eyes to his, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Not just desire, though that was present too, but something deeper. Understanding. Recognition. The look of someone who had found their missing piece. "I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "I know the circumstances are complicated. I know this started as revenge, but what I feel for you now has nothing to do with Diana or Jonathan or getting back at anyone. It's just about you and me and the fact that when I'm with you, I feel like myself for the first time in years." She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him that she felt the same way, but movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Jonathan was standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching them with undisguised anguish. "He's watching," she said softly. "I don't care. Look at him, Robert. Really look at him." Robert glanced over, and she saw his expression change. "He looks broken." He did. Jonathan stood alone among the dancing couples, his face a mask of pain and regret and desperate longing. For the first time since this whole thing began, he looked like a man who was beginning to understand what he had lost. "Is it enough?" Robert asked. "Is this what you wanted?" Vivian studied her husband's face, this man she had loved and built a life with, and tried to feel satisfaction at his obvious misery. But instead of triumph, she felt something unexpected. "Pity. I thought it would be," she admitted. "And now I think revenge is overrated." Robert spun her gently, and when she came back into his arms, she made a decision. "Robert, when this cruise is over, when we get back to Chicago, I want to see where this goes. Not as revenge, not as retaliation, but as something real, something that belongs to just us." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The song ended, but Vivian and Robert didn't separate immediately. They stood there on the dance floor, looking at each other while around them other couples continued their choreographed movements. "Vivian." Jonathan's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She turned to see her husband standing just a few feet away, his face pale and strained. "Could I speak with you, please?" She looked at Robert, who nodded slightly. "I'll be at the bar," he said, squeezing her hand before walking away. Vivian and Jonathan moved to a quiet corner of the lounge, away from the music and dancing couples. Up close, he looked even worse than she had thought. Exhausted, defeated, older than his 43 years. "Vivian, I need you to know how sorry I am." "For which part, Jonathan? The affair or getting caught?" "For all of it. For lying to you, for betraying you, for taking you for granted." His voice broke slightly. For being such a fool that I nearly lost the best thing in my life. Nearly lost. Please come home with me. Leave the ship, leave him, and come home. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over, rebuild what we had. What we had was built on a lie, Jonathan. You were never fully committed to our marriage, never fully present with me. You were always looking for something else, something more exciting. That's not true, isn't it? When did you fall out of love with me, Jonathan? When did I become so insufferable that you needed to find comfort in another woman's arms? I never fell out of love with you. Then explained Diana. Jonathan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their early dating days when he was nervous or overwhelmed. I don't know how to explain it, he said finally. It just happened. She was brilliant and challenging, and she made me feel powerful, important, like I was conquering something. You made me feel safe, comfortable. But Vivian, sometimes a man wants to feel dangerous. The honesty of it was brutal and clarifying. Jonathan hadn't cheated because she was inadequate. He had cheated because she was exactly what he needed, but not what he wanted to want. Thank you, she said. For what? For being honest. For finally telling me the truth about what I meant to you. Vivian, you wanted to feel dangerous, Jonathan. But you know what? I wanted to feel cherished. I wanted to feel like I was enough, just as I was. I wanted to feel like the man I married thought I was worth protecting, worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. That's what I'm doing right now. Vivian looked across the lounge to where Robert stood at the bar, patiently waiting for her to finish this conversation. Even from a distance, she could see the respect in his posture, the trust that she would make the right decision for herself. No, she said to Jonathan. You're fighting to keep me because you don't want to lose your safety net. You're fighting because seeing me with another man makes you feel possessive, not because you've suddenly realized my value. That's not fair. Fair. She laughed, and it was a sound without humor. Jonathan, fair would have been you talking to me when you started feeling restless in our marriage. Fair would have been couples therapy before you decided to seek excitement elsewhere. Fair would have been honesty instead of lies. What do you want me to do? How do I fix this? You can't fix this. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. She started to walk away, but Jonathan grabbed her arm. Vivian, please. I love you. She turned back to him, and for a moment she saw the young doctor she had fallen in love with all those years ago. The one who had promised to love and honor her, to forsake all others, to build a life of mutual respect and shared dreams. I know you do, she said gently. But Jonathan, love isn't enough when it comes without respect, without fidelity, without the basic consideration that your partner deserves the truth. Jonathan nodded toward Robert. You love him? I'm beginning to. After 5 days? Sometimes 5 days of honesty is worth more than 15 years of lies. She pulled her arm free from his grasp, not roughly but firmly. Goodbye, Jonathan. Vivian, wait. What about our house, our life, everything we built together? We'll figure it out. Lawyers, mediators, whatever we need to do to divide things fairly. But this, she gestured between them. This is over. She walked away from him then, back across the lounge to where Robert waited. Jonathan didn't follow, didn't make a scene. He just stood there, watching as she chose another man over him, finally understanding that actions have consequences and some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The next morning brought rough seas and a storm warning that had the crew securing everything that wasn't bolted down. Vivian and Robert sat on their small balcony despite the rolling waves, wrapped in blankets and drinking coffee while the ocean displayed its power around them. Any regrets? Robert asked, watching the gray waves crash against the ship's hull. About last night? About any of this? Vivian considered the question seriously. 5 days ago, she had been a different person, living a different life. That Vivian would have been horrified by everything that had happened since. The deception, the revenge plot, the affair of the heart, if not yet the body. But this Vivian, the one who had emerged from the wreckage of her marriage, felt no shame about any of it. No regrets, she said finally. What about you? I feel guilty about the children, about disrupting their lives, changing everything they thought they knew about their family. They're going to find out about Diana's affair eventually. Better they learn that their father has enough self-respect to leave than that he's willing to tolerate betrayal. Robert nodded, but she could see the weight of his decision in his shoulders. Diana's been texting me all morning, apologizing, begging, promising to end things with Jonathan. And I keep thinking about what you said yesterday, about how this isn't really about Jonathan and Diana anymore. It's not. Then what's it about? Vivian set down her coffee and turned to face him fully. It's about two people who found each other at exactly the moment they needed to. It's about discovering that the life you thought you wanted isn't necessarily the life that will make you happy. Vivian, I know what you're going to say, that we're both vulnerable, that we're making decisions based on emotion rather than logic, that we should take time to think things through rationally. Actually, I was going to say that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The admission hung between them like a challenge. They were sitting on a ship in the middle of a storm, having known each other for less than a week, making decisions that would reshape the rest of their lives. By any rational measure, they were acting like fools. Vivian, Robert said carefully, what happens when we get back to Chicago, when the dramatic setting disappears, and we're just two people trying to figure out how to build something real from all this chaos? I don't know, she admitted. But I know I want to find out. A particularly large wave crashed over the ship's bow, sending spray across their balcony and forcing them to retreat inside. The storm was getting worse, and the captain had announced that all passengers should remain in their cabins until it passed. Perfect, Vivian said, settling onto the small couch beside Robert. A captive audience for the next phase. Is that what this is? A next phase? The revenge part? Yes. Tonight's the third night of the cruise. Tomorrow we dock in Cozumel and everyone goes ashore. The perfect opportunity for the final escalation. As if summoned by their conversation, there was a knock at their cabin door. Vivian and Robert looked at each other, both knowing who it would be. Jonathan and Diana stood in the hallway, looking like refugees from their own lives. Diana's usually perfect composure was cracked, her designer cruise were somehow looking shabby. Jonathan appeared even worse, if possible, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. We need to talk, Diana said without preamble. All of us. This has gone far enough, Jonathan added. Robert stepped aside to let them enter, and suddenly their modest cabin felt cramped and charged with tension. The storm outside seemed to have moved indoors, bringing with it the promise of destruction. Well, Vivian said, settling back onto the couch. This should be interesting. The four of them sat in the small cabin like adversaries at a negotiation table, the storm outside providing a dramatic soundtrack to what felt like the final confrontation of a war none of them had planned to fight. Diana spoke first, her legal training evident in her carefully chosen words. Robert, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but we need to discuss this rationally as adults, thinking about our children and our families. Rationally? Robert's voice was dangerously quiet. Diana, you've been having an affair for months. You've been lying to me, to our children, to everyone who trusted you. Where was your rationality then? People make mistakes. Mistakes? Vivian interrupted. Diana, a mistake is forgetting your anniversary or double booking a dinner reservation. An affair is a series of conscious choices made over time. Every text message, every lie, every time you looked your husband in the eye and deceived him. Those were all choices. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Vivian, you're not exactly innocent here either. You've been manipulating all of us, playing psychological games. I've been responding to your betrayal, Vivian said calmly. There's a difference. By having an affair of your own. Have I? Vivian looked at Robert, then back at Jonathan. Have Robert and I done anything that you and Diana haven't done? Have we lied to our spouses? Have we snuck around behind anyone's back? Have we made promises we had no intention of keeping? The silence that followed was telling. Jonathan and Diana had no answer because they knew that everything Vivian and Robert had done had been in full view, with complete honesty about their intentions. The difference, Robert said quietly, is that Vivian and I found each other after discovering we had been betrayed. We didn't betray anyone to be together. You're destroying our families, Diana said desperately. No, Vivian replied. You destroyed our families. Robert and I are just refusing to help you rebuild them on a foundation of lies. Diana turned to her husband, tears streaming down her face. Robert, please. I love you. I love our life together. I made a terrible mistake, but it's over now. I'll do anything to fix this. Will you? Robert asked. Will you quit your job so you don't have to work with Jonathan anymore? Will you submit to a polygraph test? Will you give me access to all your devices, all your accounts, all your communications? Will you agree to individual and couples therapy for as long as it takes? Will you tell the children yourself what you did and why Daddy might be leaving? With each question, Diana's face grew paler. She clearly hadn't thought through the practical realities of rebuilding trust after such a massive betrayal. Yes, if that's what it takes. And Jonathan? Robert continued, turning to Vivian's husband. Will you do the same? Will you quit your practice? Submit to monitoring? Tell everyone we know about your affair? Take full responsibility for destroying your marriage. Jonathan opened his mouth, then closed it. Like Diana, he was beginning to understand that consequences weren't just something that happened to other people. I thought so, Robert said. You want forgiveness without accountability. You want your marriages back without having to do the work of rebuilding them. That's not fair, Jonathan protested. Fair. Vivian stood and walked to the small window, watching the storm rage outside. Jonathan, you want to know what's not fair? What's not fair is lying in bed beside your husband every night while he plans his romantic getaway with another woman. What's not fair is 15 years of devotion being repaid with betrayal. She turned back to face the room. What's not fair is realizing that the man you built your life around never really saw you as anything more than a convenient accessory to his ambitions. Vivian, that's not true. Isn't it? When you were planning this cruise with Diana, did you think about me at all? Did you consider how I would feel if I found out? Did you care about the promises you made to me, the vows you took? Jonathan couldn't meet her eyes. Of course I thought about you. And you decided I was worth the risk of hurting me this badly. I thought you'd never find out. So you thought you could lie to me for the rest of our marriage. I thought it would run its course, that it was just a phase. A phase that required booking a romantic cruise together. Jonathan had no answer for that, because they both knew the truth. He hadn't been planning to end the affair. He had been planning to continue it indefinitely, keeping both his stable marriage and his exciting mistress. Diana tried a different approach. Vivian, I know you're hurt, and I'm sorry for my part in that. But what you're doing now, breaking up 2 families, hurting 4 children, is that really going to make you feel better? You know what, Diana? It's not about feeling better. It's about refusing to pretend that your actions don't have consequences. Vivian walked over to where Robert sat, placing her hand on his shoulder. Robert and I didn't set out to have an affair. We set out to show you what betrayal feels like. But in the process, we discovered something neither of us expected. What? Jonathan asked, though he looked like he didn't really want to know. We discovered that we're compatible in ways you and I never were, Jonathan. That we share values you and Diana apparently don't share. That we can trust each other in ways that you two have proven yourselves incapable of. After 5 days? Diana's voice was incredulous. After 5 days of complete honesty, Robert corrected. 5 days of actually seeing each other, really listening, treating each other with respect and consideration. This is insane, Jonathan said, standing abruptly. Vivian, you're throwing away 15 years of marriage for a man you barely know. I'm not throwing anything away, Jonathan. You already destroyed our marriage. I'm just refusing to pretend it can be salvaged. And the house, our life together, everything we built? We'll divide it up like civilized adults. I'll take what's mine, you'll take what's yours, and we'll both move on. Just like that. Just like that. The storm outside was beginning to calm, but the one in their cabin was reaching its peak. Jonathan looked at Diana, Diana looked at Robert, and Robert looked at Vivian. So that's it, Diana asked finally. You're both just going to walk away from your marriages, your families, your entire lives? No, Vivian said quietly. We're going to walk towards something better. The rest of the day passed in an uneasy truce. The storm had blown itself out, leaving behind calm seas and brilliant sunshine, but the emotional turbulence continued to swirl through the ship. Vivian and Robert appeared at lunch together, at the afternoon poolside activities together, at the evening show together. Always the picture of a couple in love, always within sight of Jonathan and Diana, always reminding them of what they had lost. But something had changed after the morning's confrontation. The revenge felt hollow now, mechanical. Vivian found herself going through the motions not because she still wanted to hurt Jonathan and Diana, but because she wasn't sure how to stop the momentum they had created. You're thinking too much, Robert said as they walked around the ship's jogging track that evening. The sun was setting, painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson, and other passengers were beginning to dress for dinner. I keep wondering if we're doing the right thing, she admitted. Not about us, I'm certain about us. But about them. About the children. About the collateral damage we're creating. Robert stopped walking and turned to face her. Vivian, you can't take responsibility for other people's choices. Jonathan and Diana created this situation. We're just refusing to be victims of it. But the children, Emma and Jake, they're going to be caught in the middle of this divorce. And it's partly because of what we're doing here. No, it's because of what Diana did. What she chose to do when she decided an affair was worth risking her family. Vivian leaned against the ship's railing, looking out at the endless ocean. I used to think I knew exactly who I was. The devoted wife, the supportive partner, the woman who put everyone else's needs first. But that woman was living a lie. And who are you now? I'm someone who refuses to settle. Someone who believes she deserves honesty, respect, and genuine love. Someone who's willing to fight for those things even when it means destroying the life she thought she wanted. Robert moved to stand beside her at the railing. I've been married to Diana for 16 years, he said quietly. We've raised 2 children together, built a successful life, created what everyone said was the perfect family. But Vivian, in 5 days with you, I've felt more understood, more valued, more genuinely loved than I have in all those years combined. He turned to look at her. That has to mean something. That has to be worth pursuing, even if it means hurting people we care about in the short term. Vivian reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. Tomorrow we dock in Cozumel. Everyone goes ashore for the day. What do you want to do? I want to spend the day with you. Not performing for Jonathan and Diana, not playing psychological games, just being together. And then tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is the captain's gala dinner. The formal event. Black tie, assigned seating, no avoiding each other. She smiled, but it felt different now, less calculating, more anticipatory. Tomorrow night, we stop being Mr. and Mrs. Sweeney on a revenge cruise, and we start being Vivian and Robert, 2 people who found each other and decided to build something real together. And if Jonathan and Diana can't handle that, then that's their problem to solve. As they walked back toward their cabin, Vivian felt something she hadn't experienced in months, genuine anticipation for the future. Not because she was excited about hurting the people who had hurt her, but because she was excited about the possibility of happiness. Real happiness, with someone who saw her for who she truly was and loved her not in spite of her flaws and ambitions and complicated emotions, but because of them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The reality of building a relationship that had started under such dramatic circumstances, the logistics of 2 divorces and blended families, the judgment of friends and family who would struggle to understand how their marriages had imploded so quickly. But tonight, walking hand in hand with Robert under the stars, Vivian felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that the past could be repaired or that old wounds could be healed, but hope that the future could be better than anything she had dared to imagine. Hope that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing that ever happens to you. And hope that love, real love, was worth any price she might have to pay for it. The tender boat that carried them from the ocean majesty to Cozumel was crowded with excited tourists, but Vivian and Robert sat in companionable silence, watching the Mexican coast grow larger as they approached. The previous night's 4-way confrontation had drained them both, leaving behind a strange mix of satisfaction and emotional exhaustion. Did we go too far? Robert asked as they disembarked onto the busy pier. Which part? The public humiliation, or the fact that we're starting to care about each other more than we care about revenge? Both. Vivian considered the question as they made their way through the crowds of vendors and tour guides competing for tourist attention. I don't think we went far enough. Robert looked at her sharply. What do you mean? I mean they're still together. They're still on that ship, probably comforting each other, telling themselves that we're the villains in this story. They haven't faced any real consequences yet. Vivian, I think that this has gone beyond justice into something darker. But I can't stop now, Robert. I won't let them walk away from this thinking they can just outlast our anger. They found themselves at a small cafe overlooking the turquoise harbor, surrounded by the bustling energy of island life. Robert ordered 2 margaritas and they sat watching the cruise ships anchored in the bay like floating cities. Tell me what you're really thinking, she said. Robert was quiet for a long moment, turning his glass in his hands. I'm thinking that somewhere along the way, this stopped being about Diana and Jonathan. What's it about then? You and me. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. He was right, of course. What had started as a calculated revenge plot had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. Is that a problem? She asked. I don't know. 3 days ago, I was a happily married man with a successful investment firm and 2 children I adore. Now I'm sitting on a Mexican island with another man's wife, plotting elaborate psychological warfare against my own spouse. And how does that feel? Terrifying, he admitted. And more alive than I've felt in years. Vivian reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Robert, whatever happens after this cruise, I want you to know that meeting you has been the best thing to come out of this nightmare. Even though I'm helping you destroy your marriage? My marriage was already destroyed. You're helping me find myself. They spent the afternoon exploring the ancient Mayan ruins at El Cedral, walking among stones that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. There was something humbling about standing among structures that predated their petty human dramas by centuries. The Maya believed in cyclical time, Robert said as they climbed the steps of a crumbling pyramid. That everything that happens has happened before and will happen again. Do you believe that? Sometimes. Don't you think every generation thinks they're the first to experience love and betrayal and revenge? Maybe. But that doesn't make our pain less real. At the top of the pyramid, they could see for miles in every direction, jungle stretching to the horizon, the Caribbean Sea spreading out like a blue jewel, and in the distance, the white shape of their cruise ship, waiting to carry them back into the drama they had created. What happens tonight? Robert asked. Tonight is the captain's gala dinner. Black tie, assigned seating, no way to avoid each other. She smiled, and she could feel the edge in it. Tonight, we finish what we started. Preparing for the captain's gala dinner felt like donning armor for the final battle. Vivian had chosen her outfit with military precision. A stunning black evening gown that hugged her curves and flowed like liquid silk, paired with the diamond bracelet that had been her grandmother's. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, her makeup applied with the precision of war paint. Robert stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his bow tie with the kind of masculine confidence that made formal wear look effortless. He had transformed from the rumpled, hurt husband she had met 6 days ago into someone who commanded attention and respect. Ready? He asked, offering her his arm. More than ready. The main dining room had been transformed for the occasion. Crystal glasses caught the light from elaborate chandeliers, fresh orchids adorned every table, and guests moved through the space like elegant birds in their formal plumage. The captain himself, a distinguished man with a silver beard, stood near the entrance greeting passengers. But Vivian wasn't interested in the captain. Her attention was focused entirely on table 15, where Jonathan sat in his rented tuxedo next to Diana, who was stunning in a red gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Vivian and Robert were seated at table 8, close enough to observe, but far enough away to maintain their mystique. She had specifically requested this arrangement through a combination of charm and a generous tip to the maitre d'. They look miserable, Robert observed quietly as they took their seats. He was right. Despite their elegant attire, Jonathan and Diana both looked haggard. They weren't touching, weren't laughing, weren't even looking at each other. The romantic cruise they had planned was turning into a nightmare of suspicion and paranoia. Good evening, said the woman to Vivian's left, a cheerful grandmother from Texas. I'm Patricia, and this is my husband, Bill. Are you two celebrating anything special? Our 16th anniversary, Vivian replied smoothly. 20 years together. The lie came easily. She was becoming someone who could create fictional realities as needed, and she found she liked this version of herself. How wonderful, Patricia agreed. Bill and I are celebrating our 45th. Any advice for the younger couple? Robert fielded this one with surprising grace. Never go to bed angry, he said, his eyes meeting Vivian's across the table. And always remember why you fell in love in the first place. Wise words, Bill nodded. You two seem very much in love. We are, Vivian said, and realized it wasn't entirely a lie anymore. The dinner proceeded through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Vivian and Robert played their parts perfectly, the devoted couple reconnecting after some unspecified difficulty. They shared food from each other's plates, laughed at private jokes, touched each other frequently but appropriately. She could feel Jonathan watching them throughout the meal, his attention like a weight across her shoulders. Every affectionate gesture between Robert and her seemed to cause him physical pain. During the third course, Diana excused herself to the restroom. Vivian waited 5 minutes, then followed. But when she entered the elegant ladies' lounge, she found Diana wasn't alone. A woman Vivian didn't recognize was comforting Diana, who was crying into a tissue. She's been having such a hard time, the stranger was saying. Her husband left her for another woman, you know. Right here on the ship. Can you imagine? Vivian froze. Diana looked up and saw her, and something shifted in Diana's expression, calculation replacing despair. Vivian, Diana said, her voice suddenly stronger. I was just telling Mrs. Henderson about our situation. Your situation? Vivian asked carefully. About how you seduced my husband away from our family, Diana said, loud enough for Mrs. Henderson and the two other women in the lounge to hear. About how you destroyed 16 years of marriage for your own selfish pleasure. Vivian felt the room spinning. This wasn't how the story was supposed to go. Diana, that's not. Isn't it? Diana stood, her tears gone, replaced by cold fury. You manipulated Robert into believing I was having an affair so you could steal him away. You made him think I was cheating with your husband when all Jonathan and I have is a professional relationship. The other women in the lounge were staring now, their expressions shifting from sympathy for Diana to suspicion of Vivian. That's not true, Vivian said, but her voice sounded weak even to herself. Show them the photos, Vivian. Show them the evidence you claim to have of my affair with Jonathan. Vivian's mind raced. The photos. The hotel reservations. The cruise booking under false names. Suddenly she realized how easily they could be explained away. Business meetings, coincidental travel, professional conferences that happened to overlap. Without the context of the misdirected text message, without Jonathan's own admissions, the evidence was circumstantial at best. I thought so, Diana said, noting Vivian's silence. You have nothing because there's nothing to have. You've destroyed 2 marriages based on suspicion and jealousy. Vivian backed toward the door, the weight of the other women's judgment crushing her. Robert will figure out the truth eventually, Diana called after her. And when he does, you'll have nothing left. Vivian fled the ladies' room and found herself in a quiet corridor, her heart pounding, her carefully constructed confidence cracking like ice in spring. What if Diana was right? What if she had misinterpreted everything? What if the text message had been innocent, the photos misleading, the whole affair existing only in her imagination? Vivian, Robert's voice came from behind her. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. She turned to face him, and for a moment couldn't speak. How could she explain that everything they had built together might be based on a lie? That the revenge that had brought them together might have been directed at innocent people? Diana says she and Jonathan weren't having an affair, she said finally. Robert's expression didn't change. And you believe her? I don't know what to believe anymore. What if we got it wrong, Robert? What if we destroyed 2 marriages based on suspicion and circumstance? Robert took her hands in his. Vivian, look at me. Do you remember the text message on Jonathan's phone? The one about Suite 412 and the emerald dress and sailing away together? Yes, but do you remember Jonathan's reaction when we confronted him? The guilt, the attempts at explanation, the way he couldn't meet your eyes. That could be explained by what? By innocent friendship? By professional collaboration? Robert's voice was gentle but firm. Vivian, Diana is desperate. She's trying to rewrite history, to make us doubt what we know to be true. She's a lawyer. She knows how to manipulate facts and emotions. Vivian felt some of her panic subsiding. But what if? What if nothing? We both saw the evidence. We both heard the admissions. We both witnessed the guilty behavior. Diana can try to gaslight us all she wants, but she can't change the facts. He pulled her closer. But even if she could, even if somehow we were wrong about everything, it wouldn't change what's happened between us. What we've found together. That's real, Vivian. Whatever brought us together, what we have now is real. Vivian looked into his eyes and saw nothing but certainty, nothing but truth. You're right, she said. I know you're right. Diana she got in my head. That's what desperate people do. They try to make you doubt your own reality. They walked back toward the dining room, but before they entered, Robert stopped. Vivian, there's something I need to tell you. What? While you were gone, Jonathan approached me. He wanted to talk man to man. Vivian's stomach tightened. What did he say? He offered me money. A lot of money. To leave you alone and go back to Diana. The words hit her like a physical blow. How much? Does it matter? How much, Robert? $2 million. Vivian staggered. $2 million. Enough to secure his children's college education, to pay off his mortgage, to set up a comfortable life independent of Diana's income. And what did you tell him? Robert smiled, and it was the most genuine expression she had ever seen from him. I told him that some things aren't for sale. That love isn't a commodity to be bought and sold. And that if he thinks his wife can be purchased, he never deserved her in the first place. Vivian felt tears pricking her eyes. Robert, I also told him that if he ever insults what we have by offering me money again, I'll make sure everyone on this ship knows exactly what kind of man he really is." She threw her arms around him then, not caring who might see, not caring about their performance or their revenge plot or anything except the overwhelming relief of knowing that Robert was exactly who she thought he was. "I love you," she whispered against his neck. "I love you too," he whispered back. "And Vivian? We're going to be okay. Whatever Diana and Jonathan try to do, whatever games they play, we're going to be okay." They entered the dining room together, and Vivian saw immediately that something had changed. Diana and Jonathan were no longer sitting at their assigned table. They were standing near the captain, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. "What are they doing?" Vivian asked. "I don't know, but it can't be good." The captain looked up and saw Vivian and Robert approaching. His expression was troubled. "Mr. and Mrs. Sweeney," he said formally. "I wonder if I might have a word with you both." Vivian's heart sank. Whatever Diana and Jonathan had told him, it was serious enough to involve the ship's captain. "Of course," Robert said smoothly. "Is there a problem?" "I'm afraid there is," the captain replied. "It seems there's been some confusion about your identities, and some rather serious allegations have been made." Vivian felt the carefully constructed world she had built over the past week beginning to crumble around her. Diana stepped forward, her lawyer's instincts in full display. "Captain Morrison, I believe these two individuals have been traveling under false names. The man you know as Robert Sweeney is actually Robert Sweeney, but the woman is not his wife. Her name is Vivian Palmer, and she's been impersonating me in order to stalk and harass both my husband and her own." The captain looked confused. "I'm afraid I don't understand." "They're both married to other people," Jonathan added. "Vivian is my wife, and Diana is Robert's wife. They've been having an affair and trying to make us look like the villains." Vivian opened her mouth to protest, but Diana continued. "They've been telling everyone on this ship that they're celebrating their anniversary, but it's all lies. They're both cheating on their real spouses and trying to justify it by claiming we were having an affair first." The captain looked from Diana to Vivian to Robert to Jonathan, clearly trying to sort out the truth from the accusations. "This is a very serious matter," he said finally. "If there's been fraud involved in your booking, if you've been traveling under false pretenses." "There's been no fraud," Robert said calmly. "We booked this cruise as Mr. and Mrs. Sweeney because we are planning to be Mr. and Mrs. Sweeney. We're both getting divorced and intending to marry each other." "After having an affair!" Diana exclaimed. "They're trying to destroy our families." Vivian felt the weight of every passenger in the dining room staring at them. The elegant evening that was supposed to be their triumph had turned into their public humiliation. But instead of shame, she felt something else rising in her chest. Anger. Pure, righteous anger at Diana's manipulation, at Jonathan's cowardice, at their combined attempt to rewrite history and make themselves the victims. "You want to do this publicly?" Vivian said, her voice carrying across the dining room. "Fine. Let's do this publicly." She turned to address the captain, but her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Captain Morrison, 6 days ago I discovered a text message on my husband's phone. A romantic message intended for another woman. A message about sweet 412 and emerald dresses and romantic getaways. A message that revealed my husband of 15 years has been having an affair." The dining room had gone completely silent. That woman was Diana Sweeney. The same Diana Sweeney who is now claiming innocence and trying to paint me as the villain. "Robert Sweeney and I found each other because we were both betrayed by our spouses, who are standing right here trying to convince you that black is white and up is down." Diana's face had gone pale. "Vivian, don't. Don't what? Don't tell the truth? Don't expose your lies?" Vivian pulled out her phone. "Should I show everyone the photos I found on Jonathan's computer? The hotel receipts? The evidence of months of deception? Those could be explained," Diana started. "Could they? Could you explain the text message about wanting to peel off the emerald dress while watching the sunset from your private balcony? Could you explain why you told your husband you were attending a conference in Denver while you were actually planning a romantic cruise with my husband?" Robert stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for disrupting your evening. But since we're being accused publicly, I think you deserve to know the truth. My wife Diana Sweeney has been having an affair with Dr. Jonathan Palmer for months. Vivian Palmer and I discovered this fact and decided to confront them here, on this ship, rather than simply filing for divorce quietly." He looked directly at Diana. "We're not the ones who broke our marriage vows. We're not the ones who lied to our children, our friends, our families. We're simply the ones who refused to be victims. The captain looked overwhelmed by the domestic drama unfolding in his dining room. Perhaps this discussion would be better held in private. No, Vivian said firmly. Diana wanted to make this public, to paint herself as the victim. Let her live with the consequences. She turned to face the crowded dining room. How many of you have been married for 10 years or more? She asked. Several hands went up throughout the room. How many of you have ever worried that your spouse might be cheating on you? More hands. Then you'll understand why Robert and I felt we had no choice but to confront our cheating spouses in the most public way possible. Because private confrontations just lead to more lies, more gaslighting, more manipulation. She gestured toward Diana and Jonathan. These two people destroyed our families. They betrayed our trust, violated our marriages, and lied to our faces for months. And now they want us to quietly disappear while they rewrite history to make themselves look innocent. Vivian, please, Jonathan said desperately. Can't we discuss this privately? We had 15 years to discuss things privately, Jonathan. You chose to have an affair instead. The captain cleared his throat. I'm going to have to ask all of you to continue this conversation elsewhere. This is disrupting the other passengers' evening. Of course, Vivian said graciously. But before we go, I want everyone here to know something. She took Robert's hand. What Robert and I have found together is real. It's honest. It's built on truth instead of lies, on respect instead of betrayal. And if that makes us the villains in Diana and Jonathan's story, then I'm proud to be a villain. They walked out of the dining room together, leaving behind a buzz of conversation and speculation. Behind them, Diana and Jonathan stood exposed, their careful lies crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. In the corridor outside, Vivian finally allowed herself to tremble. I can't believe we just did that, she said. I can't believe we just won, Robert replied. Won? Vivian, look around. Every person in that dining room now knows the truth. Diana's manipulation backfired spectacularly. Instead of making us look like the villains, she made herself and Jonathan look like exactly what they are, liars and cheaters trying to avoid consequences. He was right. The confrontation that was supposed to destroy them had instead revealed Diana and Jonathan's true characters to everyone on the ship. So what happens now? Vivian asked. Robert smiled and pulled her into his arms. Now we go back to our cabin and let them deal with the mess they created. Tomorrow we dock in Miami, and we start building our real life together. Are you sure about this? About us? About throwing away everything you built with Diana for someone you've known for a week? Vivian, I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Diana and I built a life based on convenience and compromise. What you and I have is based on truth and choice. There's no comparison. He kissed her then, in the corridor outside the dining room, while inside their former spouses dealt with the consequences of their choices. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Vivian felt truly free. Not free from consequences. There would be plenty of those to deal with in the days and weeks ahead. But free from lies, from pretense, from living a life that wasn't authentic to who she really was. Free to love and be loved honestly. Free to build something real with someone who saw her clearly and chose her completely. Free to start over, even if starting over meant destroying everything that had come before. The revenge was complete. But more importantly, their real story was just beginning. Vivian woke up the next morning alone in the king-sized bed, sunlight streaming through the balcony doors and the sound of waves creating a peaceful soundtrack that felt incongruous with the storm of emotions inside her chest. Robert had insisted on taking the small couch again despite her protests, and she could hear him moving around quietly in the sitting area. Good morning, she called out, pulling on a silk robe. Morning. I ordered room service, coffee, fruit, pastries. I hope that's all right. She found him standing on the balcony, already dressed in khakis and a polo shirt, looking out at the Miami coastline growing larger as they approached port. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much. Second thoughts? She asked, joining him with a cup of coffee. Third and fourth thoughts, he admitted. Vivian, what we did last night, it worked maybe too well. What do you mean? He handed her his phone. On the screen was a text message from Diana, sent at 4:17 in the morning. Robert, I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I can explain everything. I love you. I love our family. Please call me. The children are asking questions. Vivian stared at the message, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Triumph that their plan was having the desired effect, but also something else, something that felt uncomfortably like regret. "She's scared," she said finally. "Yes, and part of me wants to respond, wants to give her the chance to explain. But then I keep thinking about her laughing with your husband last night, about how confident she looked when she thought she could manipulate the situation. She did try to manipulate the situation. She tried to make us doubt our own reality." Vivian set down her coffee and leaned against the railing. "Robert, if you want to talk to her, if you want to try to work things out, do you want to work things out with Jonathan?" The question stopped her cold. She realized that she hadn't received any messages from her husband. No frantic texts, no missed calls, no attempts at explanation or reconciliation. "He hasn't contacted me at all," she said, and heard the hurt in her own voice. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It tells me everything I need to know about his priorities." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ocean roll past. Today was their final full day on the ship, which meant all passengers would be on board with nowhere to hide. The perfect opportunity for the final phase of their psychological warfare. But Vivian found herself reluctant to continue the game. Last night's public confrontation had felt different. Not strategic or calculated, but raw and honest and necessary. "What's the plan for today?" Robert asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Yesterday I would have said we escalate, make them more miserable, really give them something to regret. But now I keep thinking about Emma and Jake. About how this is going to affect them when they find out their parents are getting divorced. About whether we're doing the right thing or just causing more pain." Robert turned to face her fully. "Vivian, you can't take responsibility for Diana's choices. She's the one who decided an affair was worth risking her family for. We didn't make that choice for her. But we made the choice to handle it this way. We chose public humiliation over private confrontation. We chose revenge over simply walking away." She walked back inside, suddenly feeling claustrophobic on the small balcony. What if we're not the heroes in this story? What if we're just two hurt people who decided to hurt other people back? Robert followed her inside and sat on the edge of the bed. "Vivian, look at me. Do you regret meeting me?" "No, never." "Do you regret discovering the truth about Jonathan and Diana?" "No." "Do you regret choosing to be with me instead of pretending your marriage was worth saving?" "No, but..." "Then we did what we needed to do. Maybe our methods were dramatic, maybe we could have handled things differently, but the core of it, choosing truth over lies, choosing each other over marriages that were already destroyed, that was right." Vivian sat beside him on the bed. "I just keep thinking about the Vivian I was a week ago. She would be horrified by what I've done. The plotting, the deception, the public scene last night. And how do you feel about that Vivian now?" She considered the question. "I feel sorry for her. She was so concerned with being perfect, with never making waves, with being the wife everyone expected her to be. She was living such a small life. And this Vivian? This Vivian is terrifying and exhilarating and more herself than she's ever been." Robert reached over and took her hand. "Then trust her. Trust yourself. Trust that you know the difference between right and wrong, between justice and cruelty." There was a knock at the door, sharp, insistent, angry. Vivian and Robert looked at each other, both knowing it wasn't room service. Robert opened the door to find Jonathan standing in the hallway, disheveled and wild-eyed. "We need to talk," Jonathan said, pushing past Robert into the cabin. "All of this has gone too far." "Jonathan, you can't just..." Vivian started. "Can't what? Can't try to save my marriage? Can't try to talk sense into my wife before she destroys both our lives." Vivian stood, pulling her robe tighter around herself. "You're concerned about destroying lives? That's rich, coming from someone who's been lying to his wife for months." "I made a mistake, Vivian. One mistake. But what you're doing now, this public humiliation, this affair of your own, this is deliberate cruelty." "One mistake." Vivian's voice rose. "Jonathan, you booked a romantic cruise with another woman. You've been having secret dinners, hotel room meetings, text message conversations about peeling off her clothes. That's not one mistake. That's a sustained campaign of betrayal. And your response is to have an affair with her husband? To try to destroy two families instead of one." Robert stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. "Jonathan, I'm going to ask you to leave. This conversation is over." "No, it's not over. Not until Vivian comes to her senses and realizes what she's throwing away." "What am I throwing away?" Vivian asked. "A marriage built on lies? A husband who thinks so little of me that he can't even remember my birthday? A life where I'm nothing more than an accessory to your ambitions. That's not fair. Fair. Vivian laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you ending our marriage before you started a new relationship. Fair would have been honesty instead of deception. Jonathan's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the young resident she had fallen in love with 16 years ago. Vivian, please. I love you. I've always loved you. No, you love the idea of me. You love having a wife who doesn't question, doesn't demand, doesn't expect to be treated like an equal partner. She walked to the window, looking out at the ocean. Do you know what Robert did yesterday when you offered him $2 million to leave me alone? Jonathan's face went pale. He told me about it immediately. He didn't even consider it. He said some things aren't for sale, that love isn't a commodity. She turned back to face her husband. In contrast, you thought you could buy your way out of the consequences of your choices. I was desperate. You were revealed. When people are desperate, their true character shows. Your first instinct wasn't to fight for me or to prove you deserved another chance. It was to try to eliminate the competition with money. Robert moved to stand beside Vivian, not touching but offering his presence as support. Jonathan, I understand you're hurting. I understand you're scared. But Vivian has made her choice, and you need to respect that. Respect. Jonathan's desperation was transforming into anger. You want to talk about respect? You seduced my wife away from me. You manipulated her into believing lies about Diana and me. I didn't seduce anyone, Robert said calmly. Vivian came to me with evidence of your affair. We decided to confront you together. Everything that's happened since then has been a natural consequence of the choices you and Diana made. Natural consequence? You've turned my wife against me. You've poisoned her mind. I opened her eyes, Robert corrected. There's a difference. Jonathan looked between them, his face cycling through emotions. Hurt, anger, desperation, and finally, something that looked like understanding. You're really not coming back, he said to Vivian. No, I'm not. And him? You're really choosing him over me? Vivian considered the question seriously. I'm not choosing Robert over you, Jonathan. I'm choosing honesty over deception. I'm choosing respect over betrayal. I'm choosing a partner who sees me as an equal instead of an accessory. The fact that Robert embodies those qualities while you don't isn't really about him at all. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. What about our house? Our life together? Everything we built. We'll divide it fairly. Lawyers will handle the details. But Jonathan, the life we built was based on a foundation of lies. It was going to crumble eventually anyway. And if you're wrong, if what you have with him doesn't last, if you regret this choice, Vivian looked at Robert, then back at her husband. Then I'll still be better off than I was living a lie with you. The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Jonathan nodded slowly, the fight going out of him. I guess there's nothing left to say then. I guess not. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Vivian? For what it's worth, I am sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. I know, she said quietly. But meaning never to hurt someone and actually not hurting them are two different things. After he left, Vivian and Robert stood in the quiet cabin, both processing the finality of what had just happened. That felt like goodbye, Vivian said. It was goodbye. The real one this time. She sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Why don't I feel triumphant? We got what we wanted: public vindication, admissions of guilt, the end of our marriages to people who betrayed us. So why do I feel so empty? Yes. Robert sat beside her. Because revenge isn't really about making yourself feel better. It's about making them feel worse. And once you accomplish that, you realize it doesn't actually heal the hurt they caused. So what does heal it? Building something better. Creating a life that makes the pain worth it. Vivian leaned against his shoulder. Is that what we're doing? Building something better? I hope so. But Vivian, I need you to know something. If you're having doubts about us, about whether this is real or just a reaction to being hurt, I'll understand. The last thing I want is for you to wake up in 6 months and realize you made a decision based on anger instead of love. Vivian pulled back to look at him. Robert, when I'm with you, I feel like the person I was always meant to be. Not the perfect wife, not the supporting character in someone else's story, but myself. Fully and completely myself. That's not anger talking, that's recognition. You're sure? I'm sure. They spent the rest of the day quietly, avoiding the common areas where they might encounter Diana and Jonathan, instead staying in their cabin and on their private balcony. It felt like a cocoon, protecting them from the outside world while they processed the enormity of what they had done and what they were planning to do next. "Tomorrow we dock in Miami," Robert said as they watched the sunset paint the ocean in shades of orange and gold. "Tomorrow we become regular people again, dealing with lawyers and custody arrangements and all the mundane details of dismantling our old lives. Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready for anything as long as we face it together." That evening, they had dinner in their cabin, room service brought by a discreet steward who didn't comment on their desire for privacy. They were finishing dessert when there was another knock at the door. This time it was Diana, looking composed and professional in a navy dress that was probably designed to project authority and respectability. "May I come in?" she asked. "I think we owe each other a civilized conversation before this cruise ends." Vivian and Robert exchanged glances. "5 minutes," Robert said, stepping aside. Diana entered their cabin and looked around, at the intimate table setting, the wine glasses, the obvious signs of a couple sharing space. "So this is real then," she said. "Not just an elaborate revenge plot." "It's real," Vivian confirmed. "How convenient for you both. You get to destroy 2 marriages and find true love at the same time." "Diana," Robert started. "No, let me finish. I came here to apologize, to take responsibility for my part in this mess. Yes, I had feelings for Jonathan. Yes, we crossed lines we shouldn't have crossed. But what you two have done in response, the manipulation, the public humiliation, the calculated cruelty, that's not justice. That's sadism." Vivian felt a flicker of the doubt that had been plaguing her all day. "We responded to betrayal with truth," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Did you? Or did you respond to betrayal with a more sophisticated form of betrayal?" Diana turned to Robert. "Do you know what your children asked me this morning? They asked if Daddy was going to live with the nice lady from the ship now. Emma, your 14-year-old daughter, asked if she did something wrong to make Daddy leave." Robert's face went pale. "How did they?" News travels fast on a ship this size. The story of last night's dinner scene has spread to every passenger on board, including the children. Vivian felt sick. "Diana, we never intended." "What? You never intended for there to be consequences? For real people to get hurt by your games?" Diana's composure finally cracked, revealing the raw pain underneath. "I made a mistake, Vivian. A terrible, selfish mistake that I will regret for the rest of my life. But you two? You made a choice. You chose to punish us as publicly and cruelly as possible, and now innocent children are paying the price." She turned to leave, then paused. "I hope you'll be very happy together. I hope what you've built on the ruins of our families will be worth the pain you've caused." After she left, Vivian and Robert sat in silence for a long time. "She's not wrong," Vivian said finally. "About what?" "About the children. About the public humiliation. About us becoming the kind of people who cause pain instead of just experiencing it." Robert was quiet, staring at his hands. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "All of it." Vivian considered the question carefully. "I regret that children got hurt. I regret that we handled things in a way that maximized drama instead of minimizing damage. But do I regret finding you? Do I regret choosing truth over comfortable lies? No, I don't regret those things. Even if it makes us the villains in someone else's story. Everyone's the hero of their own story, Robert. Diana sees herself as the wronged woman whose husband was stolen by manipulative strangers. Jonathan sees himself as the man whose moment of weakness was punished far beyond what the crime deserved. But their perspective doesn't make it true. She moved to sit closer to him. "We didn't break our marriage vows. We didn't lie to our children. We didn't deceive anyone about who we were or what we wanted. Yes, our methods were dramatic, but our cause was just. And tomorrow, when we go back to Chicago and have to face the real-world consequences of our choices, tomorrow we start building something real together. Something honest and open and worth all the pain it took to get here." Robert reached for her hand. "I love you, Vivian. Whatever anyone else thinks about how we got here, whatever guilt I carry about Diana and the children, that remains true. I love you. I love you too. And I believe that love, real love, is worth fighting for. Even if the fight gets ugly. Even if people get hurt. Even if we become the kind of people our old selves wouldn't recognize." They went to bed that night holding each other close, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. Custody battles and divorce proceedings and the judgment of friends and family who would struggle to understand how their lives had changed so completely in such a short time. But tonight, in their small cabin surrounded by the endless ocean, they had each other. And sometimes, when the world is falling apart around you, having one person who truly sees you and chooses you anyway is enough to make the chaos worthwhile. Outside their window, the ship continued its journey toward Miami, carrying them all toward whatever future awaited beyond the horizon. A future none of them could have imagined a week ago, but which now seemed as inevitable as the sunrise. Vivian woke before dawn on their final morning, the ship's gentle rocking having become as familiar as her own heartbeat over the past week. Robert was still asleep on the small couch, his face peaceful in the early light filtering through their balcony doors. In a few hours, they would dock in Miami. In a few hours, their floating sanctuary would become just another cruise ship, and they would become just another couple facing the complicated reality of building a life together from the wreckage of their previous ones. She slipped quietly onto the balcony with her coffee, watching the Florida coast grow larger on the horizon. 7 days ago, she had been Vivian Palmer, devoted wife, living a life she thought was perfect. Now she was, who exactly? Vivian Sweeney to be? Robert's partner? A woman who had destroyed 2 families in pursuit of her own happiness? The questions that had been plaguing her since Diana's visit last night felt heavier in the pre-dawn darkness. "You're up early." Robert's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep, wearing only boxer shorts and a t-shirt. Even disheveled, even in the uncertain light of morning, he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Too much to think about." He joined her at the railing, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "Regrets? Questions? Such as?" Vivian was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Such as, who are we when we're not defined by our revenge against Jonathan and Diana? What happens when the drama ends, and we're just 2 people trying to figure out if what we have is real or just a response to trauma?" Robert studied her profile in the morning light. "And what answers are you coming up with?" "I don't know. That's the problem." She turned to face him fully. "Robert, what if we're making the biggest mistake of our lives? What if we're throwing away everything solid and real for something that only exists because of extraordinary circumstances? Is that what you think we're doing?" "I think I'm scared. I think I've never made a decision this big, this life-altering, this quickly. I think the Vivian I was a week ago would be horrified by the woman I've become." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Vivian, can I tell you something?" "Of course." The Robert the First was a week ago was dying. Slowly, quietly, but dying nonetheless. He was a man who worked 60 hours a week to pay for a lifestyle that brought him no joy. He was a father who barely knew his own children, because he was always at the office. He was a husband who had settled for a marriage of convenience instead of fighting for a marriage of love. He moved closer to her. That Robert was safe. He was predictable. He caused no trouble and expected no trouble in return. But he was also living a lie, Vivian. Just like you were. The lie that we could be happy with comfortable mediocrity. The lie that we didn't deserve more. Vivian felt tears pricking her eyes. But what about Emma and Jake? What about the innocent people who are going to pay the price for our self-discovery? What about them if we stay in marriages that make us miserable? What kind of example does that set? What kind of love are we modeling for them? Robert reached for her hands. "Vivian, I've thought about this constantly since Diana's visit last night. And here's what I've concluded. Our children deserve parents who are authentic, who pursue truth even when it's difficult, who believe that love is worth fighting for. Even if the fight destroys their sense of stability? Especially then, because stability built on lies isn't really stable at all. It's just delayed collapse." Vivian looked out at the ocean, at the endless expanse of water that had carried them through this transformation. "So what are you saying? That we're heroes for blowing up our families?" "I'm saying we're human beings who made the best choices we could with the information we had. We discovered betrayal and responded with truth. We found love and chose to pursue it. The fact that those choices have consequences, even painful ones, doesn't make them wrong. And if we're wrong, if what we have doesn't last, if we've destroyed 4 lives for nothing." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Then we'll deal with those consequences too. But Vivian, the alternative, going back to Jonathan, pretending his affair never happened, living the rest of our lives as the perfect wife to a man who doesn't respect you enough to be faithful. That's not an option anymore. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unfeel what you felt." She knew he was right. The Vivian who could have forgiven Jonathan's affair, who could have gone to couples counseling and rebuilt their marriage on a foundation of monitored trust and conditional forgiveness, had died the moment she read that text message. "There's something else," she said. "Something I haven't told you." Robert's expression grew concerned. "What?" "Yesterday, while you were in the shower, I got a call from my sister Claire. She'd heard rumors about what was happening. Apparently the story of our dinner scene has made it back to Chicago already." Robert's face went pale. "What kind of rumors?" "That I'd had a nervous breakdown. That I was having a public affair to get back at Jonathan. That I'd lost my mind and was making decisions I'd regret for the rest of my life." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I'd never been more sane in my life." "But Robert, the fact that people back home are already talking, already judging, already deciding what kind of story this is. Does it matter what they think?" Vivian considered the question. "It matters that Emma and Jake are going to grow up hearing whispers about how their parents' marriage ended. It matters that our friends are going to have to choose sides. It matters that we're not just changing our own lives, we're forcing everyone who knows us to deal with the fallout." Robert leaned against the railing, his expression troubled. "Vivian, are you having second thoughts about us? About leaving Jonathan?" "I'm having second thoughts about how we did it. The public confrontations, the calculated humiliation, the revenge plot that turned into something real. What if we could have handled this differently? What if we could have found each other without destroying so much in the process?" "How?" The question hung in the air between them. How could they have handled it differently? Quiet divorces, discreet affairs, private pain that didn't become public spectacle? But even as she considered the alternatives, Vivian knew none of them would have led to this moment, to this clarity about what she wanted and who she wanted to be. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe there was no other way." "Vivian, look at me." She turned to face him. "In about 3 hours, we're going to walk off this ship and into whatever comes next. Before we do that, I need to know, are you choosing me or are you just running from Jonathan?" The question was brutal in its honesty. "I need to know that when we face the lawyers and the custody battles and the judgment of everyone we know, you're going to be standing beside me because you want to be there, not because you can't figure out how to go back." Vivian felt something crystallize inside her chest. "Robert, a week ago I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought it was quiet dinners and shared routines and comfortable predictability. I thought it was never fighting, never questioning, never demanding more than what was offered." She moved closer to him. "But love isn't comfortable. Love is terrifying. Love is standing on the deck of a cruise ship at dawn, ready to walk away from everything you thought you wanted because you've discovered something you actually need." "And what do you need?" "I need a partner who sees me clearly and chooses me anyway. I need someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. I need a man who would turn down $2 million because some things aren't for sale." She reached up to touch his face. "I need you, Robert. Not as an escape from Jonathan, not as revenge against Diana, but because you're the person I want to build a life with. Because when I imagine my future, you're in every scene." Robert's eyes closed as if in relief. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her then, there on the balcony as the sun rose over Miami, and Vivian felt the last of her doubts dissolve. They were going to face consequences. They were going to hurt people they cared about. They were going to be judged and criticized and probably condemned by some of the people they loved most. But they were going to face all of it together, as partners, as equals, as two people who had chosen truth over comfort and love over security. "So what happens now?" she asked when they broke apart. "Now we get dressed and pack our things and prepare to become regular people again. Are you ready for regular people problems? Custody schedules and mortgage payments and grocery shopping." Robert laughed, and the sound was full of anticipation rather than dread. "Vivian, I've been dreaming of regular people problems. I've been dreaming of a life where the most dramatic thing that happens is arguing about whose turn it is to take out the trash. You might be disappointed. I have a feeling our life together is going to be anything but ordinary." "Why?" "Because we're not ordinary people. We're people who met on a revenge cruise and fell in love while plotting psychological warfare against our cheating spouses. We're people who chose each other after knowing each other for a week. We're people who believe that love is worth fighting for, even when the fight gets ugly." She smiled, and it was the first completely unguarded expression she had worn since this whole ordeal began. "We're never going to be the couple who has quiet dinners and shared routines and comfortable predictability." "Good," Robert said. "I never want to be comfortable again. Comfortable is what got us into marriages with people who could betray us without thinking twice. They spent the next hour packing in companionable silence, folding clothes that had witnessed the most dramatic week of their lives. Vivian looked at the emerald dress that had never been worn for Jonathan, at the black gown she had worn to their public confrontation, at the simple clothes that had become costumes in their elaborate performance. "What do we do with all of this?" she asked. "The memories, the artifacts, the evidence of what we've done." "We keep them," Robert said without hesitation. "Not because we're proud of the pain we caused, but because we're not ashamed of the love we found. This is our origin story, Vivian. Messy and complicated and morally ambiguous, but ours." A knock at the door interrupted them. They looked at each other, wondering who could be visiting on their last morning. Robert opened the door to find a young crew member holding a silver tray. "Compliments of the captain, sir. He wanted to make sure you and your wife had a proper farewell breakfast." On the tray was an elegant spread, fresh fruit, pastries, champagne, and 2 cards. One was from Captain Morrison. "Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness together. May your love weather all storms." The other was unsigned. "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. A fellow passenger." Vivian felt tears threatening again. Even in the middle of all the drama and judgment, there are people who see what we have and recognize it as something worth celebrating. Does that surprise you? Yes. I expected everyone to see us as the villains. Maybe some people recognize that love stories aren't always pretty. Maybe some people understand that sometimes you have to break things before you can build something better. They ate their farewell breakfast on the balcony, watching Miami grow larger and more detailed as they approached. Soon they would be able to see individual buildings, individual people going about their regular lives, unaware that 2 people on a cruise ship were about to join them in the complicated business of being human. "Robert," Vivian said as they finished their champagne, "there's one more thing I need to know before we dock." "What's that?" "Are you going to be able to live with what we've done? The public humiliation, the pain we caused Diana and Jonathan, the disruption to your children's lives? Because I need to know that you're not going to wake up in 6 months full of regret and resentment." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Vivian, I'm going to live with guilt about Emma and Jake for the rest of my life. I'm going to question whether there was a better way to handle this situation. I'm going to wonder sometimes if the cost of our happiness was too high." He reached for her hand. "But I'm also going to live with the knowledge that I chose authenticity over pretense, truth over comfortable lies, and real love over settled compromise. And when I balance those things against each other, I know which side is heavier." Vivian squeezed his hand. "Even if people think we're terrible people? Even if people think we're terrible people. Because Vivian, the alternative was living a lie for the rest of our lives. And I've discovered that I'd rather be a terrible person who's genuinely happy than a good person who's slowly dying inside." The ship's horn sounded, announcing their arrival in Miami. Their week in limbo was ending. Their real life together was about to begin. "Are you ready?" Robert asked. Vivian looked around their cabin one last time. At the balcony where they had planned their revenge, at the bed where they had talked through their doubts, at the small space that had contained the transformation of 2 broken people into something new. "I'm ready," she said. And she meant it. Whatever came next, the lawyers, the custody battles, the social judgment, the practical difficulties of merging 2 complicated lives, she was ready to face it with Robert beside her. She was ready to be the kind of person who chose love over security, truth over comfort, authentic happiness over socially acceptable misery. She was ready to discover what their love looked like in the real world, outside the heightened drama of their floating sanctuary. She was ready to find out if what they had built could survive the transition from revenge plot to real life. Most of all, she was ready to stop being defined by what had been done to her and start being defined by what she chose to do next. Hand in hand, they walked toward the door of their cabin, toward whatever future waited beyond the gangway. Behind them, the Ocean Majesty prepared for its next group of passengers, its next collection of love stories and heartbreaks and transformations. But Vivian and Robert were no longer passengers. They were partners, setting foot on solid ground for the first time as the people they had chosen to become. The revenge was complete. The real story was just beginning. The disembarkation process was chaos. Thousands of passengers queuing with their luggage, families reuniting, vacation romances saying tearful goodbyes, and the general bustle of a floating city returning its inhabitants to the real world. Vivian and Robert stood in line with their modest suitcases, surrounded by the evidence of other people's vacations. Sunburned children clutching stuffed dolphins, couples wearing matching t-shirts, elderly passengers already planning their next cruise. "It feels anticlimactic," Vivian observed, watching a family argue about missing souvenirs. "After everything that's happened, we're just standing in line like everyone else." "What did you expect? A brass band? A red carpet? Maybe. Or at least some acknowledgement that we're not the same people who boarded this ship a week ago." Robert squeezed her hand. "We'll acknowledge it. That's all that matters." They moved slowly forward in the queue, and Vivian found herself scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Diana and Jonathan were nowhere to be seen, probably having arranged priority disembarkation to avoid any final confrontations. But as they approached the gangway, Vivian spotted a figure she recognized leaning against a pillar in the terminal. Claire, her sister, dressed in jeans and a worried expression. "Oh no," Vivian breathed. "What?" "My sister. She's here." Robert followed her gaze and saw a woman who looked like a younger, more conventional version of Vivian. "She flew down from Chicago?" "Apparently. Which means she thinks I've completely lost my mind and need an intervention." They reached the gangway, showed their documents to the crew member, and stepped off the Ocean Majesty onto solid ground. Vivian felt a moment of vertigo, not from the transition from ship to shore, but from the finality of it. There was no going back now. No more floating sanctuary, no more suspension of reality. This was real life, starting now. "Vivian," Claire's voice carried across the busy terminal. Vivian turned to see her sister pushing through the crowd, her face a mix of relief and concern. "Claire, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" "Vivian, you disappeared for a week. The rumor mill in Chicago is going crazy, and the last time I talked to you, you sounded like someone I didn't even recognize." Claire's eyes shifted to Robert, taking in the way he stood protectively beside Vivian, the obvious intimacy between them. "And you must be the mysterious Robert Sweeney I've been hearing about." "Claire," Vivian started. "Is it true? Are you really leaving Jonathan for a man you met on this cruise?" The conversation was attracting attention from other passengers, and Vivian felt the familiar weight of public scrutiny. "Can we do this somewhere more private?" she asked. "No, actually, I think we should do this right here, right now. Because Vivian, I've known you for 38 years, and the woman who would blow up her entire life for a vacation romance isn't someone I recognize." Robert stepped forward. "Mrs. Harper. Claire Harper. And before you say anything, let me tell you what I know about you. You're married to a pharmaceutical sales rep named Diana. You have 2 children. And a week ago, you were a stranger to my sister." "Claire, stop," Vivian said firmly. "You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. Explain how my sister, who spent 15 years being the perfect wife, suddenly decided to have a public affair to get revenge on her husband." "It's not revenge anymore," Vivian said quietly. "What?" "It started as revenge. But it's not that anymore. It's love." Claire's expression shifted from anger to something that looked almost like pity. "Vivian, honey, you can't know that after a week. You can't upend your entire life based on feelings that might just be a reaction to being hurt." "She can if those feelings are real," Robert said quietly. "If they're based on genuine compatibility and shared values and mutual respect." "And how exactly would you know that after 7 days? Because sometimes 7 days of honesty is more revealing than 15 years of comfortable lies." Claire looked between them, her frustration evident. "This is insane. Both of you. You're both married to other people. You have responsibilities, commitments, children who depend on you." "We have responsibilities to be authentic," Vivian replied. "To show our children what real love looks like, even when it's complicated." "Real love? You met a week ago. And in that week, we've been through more honest communication and genuine partnership than I had in 15 years with Jonathan." Claire shook her head. "I don't believe this. The Vivian I know would never." "The Vivian you know was living a lie," Vivian interrupted. "She was married to a man who was having an affair, spending her days being the perfect wife to someone who didn't respect her enough to be faithful." "Jonathan was having an affair?" Vivian pulled out her phone, showing Claire the screenshots she had saved of the text messages, the photos, the evidence that had started this whole ordeal. Claire's face went pale as she scrolled through the images. "Oh, Vivian. I had no idea. Jonathan always seemed so perfect? So devoted? So successful?" "Yes, that's exactly the image he wanted everyone to have." Claire handed the phone back, her anger deflating into something more complex. But even so, she gestured between Vivian and Robert, this isn't the answer. You could have gotten counseling, worked things out, figured out how to rebuild your marriage. With a man who offered Robert $2 million to leave me alone? Vivian asked. With a man who, when confronted with the consequences of his choices, tried to buy his way out of them. Claire was quiet for a moment, processing this information. He did what? Robert nodded. Your sister's husband thought my feelings for her could be purchased. That tells you everything you need to know about his character and his understanding of what love actually means. So you're both just going to walk away from your marriages, your families, your entire lives? We're going to walk towards something better, Vivian said, echoing the words she had spoken to Diana and Jonathan. Claire, I know this looks impulsive and dramatic, but it's not. It's the most carefully considered decision I've ever made. Based on what? Based on the fact that when I'm with Robert, I feel like the person I was always meant to be. Based on the fact that he sees me clearly and chooses me completely. Based on the fact that what we have is built on truth instead of lies, on respect instead of betrayal. Claire looked at Robert. And what about your children? Emma and Jake? How are you going to explain to them that Daddy left Mommy for someone he met on a cruise ship? Robert's expression grew pained, but his voice remained steady. I'm going to explain to them that sometimes adults make mistakes that can't be fixed, and that sometimes the kindest thing is to start over rather than pretend everything is fine. I'm going to tell them that I love them more than anything in the world, and that will never change, regardless of who I'm married to. And if they hate you for it, then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn their forgiveness. But I won't lie to them about who I am or what makes me happy. Children deserve parents who are authentic, even when authenticity is complicated. Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying both of them. You're really serious about this, she said finally. Completely serious, Vivian confirmed. And you're happy? Really, genuinely happy? Vivian looked at Robert, then back at her sister. I'm terrified and exhilarated and more myself than I've ever been. So yes, I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. Claire sighed. I still think you're both completely insane. But, she trailed off. But I haven't seen you this animated in years. Even when you were talking about Jonathan, even during the good times, you never looked like this. Like what? Like someone who's fully awake. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. Does that mean you understand? Maybe not approve, but understand. Claire considered the question. I understand that you're my sister, and I love you. I understand that if Jonathan was cheating, he doesn't deserve another chance. And I understand that life is short and complicated, and sometimes you have to make difficult choices. She looked at Robert. I don't know you, and I can't say I approve of how this all happened. But if you hurt her, if you turn out to be just another man who breaks my sister's heart, I will make your life very difficult. Robert smiled, and it was the first genuinely relaxed expression Vivian had seen from him all day. I wouldn't expect anything less. And for what it's worth, I have no intention of hurting her. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. We'll see, Claire said, but there was warmth in her voice. They were interrupted by a commotion near the ship. Vivian turned to see Diana and Jonathan standing at the bottom of the gangway, engaged in what appeared to be an intense argument. Even from a distance, it was clear that their romantic cruise had not ended the way they had planned. Are those them? Claire asked. That's them. They look miserable. They should, Robert said quietly. They made choices that hurt people they claimed to love. Now they're facing the consequences. As they watched, Diana gestured angrily at Jonathan, who appeared to be trying to calm her down. Their body language spoke of recrimination and blame, of two people whose shared secret had become a shared nightmare. Should we go over there? Vivian asked. Try to end this civilly? No, Robert said firmly. We said everything we needed to say on the ship. Now they need to figure out how to live with their choices, just like we're figuring out how to live with ours. Claire looked between the feuding couple and Vivian and Robert. So this is really it? This is how it ends. This is how it ends, Vivian confirmed. And how it begins. They collected their luggage and walked toward the exit, leaving the chaos of the cruise terminal behind. Outside, Miami was bright and hot and full of the kind of ordinary life Vivian was eager to rejoin. What happens now? Claire asked as they waited for Robert's rental car. Now we drive back to Chicago, Vivian said. We find lawyers, file for divorce, figure out custody arrangements. We deal with all the practical details of ending 2 marriages and starting a new life together. And then, Vivian looked at Robert, who was loading their suitcases into the trunk. And then we find out what our love looks like in the real world. We discover whether what we built on that ship can survive mortgages and grocery shopping and parent-teacher conferences. Are you scared? Terrified? But also excited? For the first time in my adult life, I'm building something that's entirely mine. Not what's expected of me, not what's convenient for someone else, but what I actually want. Claire hugged her then fiercely. I still think you're crazy, but I also think you're the bravest person I know. Why? Because it takes courage to blow up your entire life when you discover it's built on lies. It takes courage to choose truth over comfort. And it takes courage to believe that love is worth fighting for, even when the fight gets ugly. Vivian felt something settle in her chest, not peace exactly, but resolution. Claire understood. Maybe not completely, maybe not without reservations, but she understood that sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice, that sometimes you have to destroy something broken before you can build something whole. Ready? Robert asked, closing the trunk. Ready, Vivian replied. They climbed into the rental car, Claire in the back seat, and began the long drive north toward Chicago, toward divorce lawyers and custody battles and the judgment of friends who would struggle to understand how their lives had changed so completely. But also toward something neither of them had ever had before, a partnership based on choice rather than circumstance, on honesty rather than convenience, on the kind of love that emerges when 2 people see each other clearly and decide to build something real together. As they drove out of Miami, Vivian caught a glimpse of the ocean majesty in the rearview mirror, already preparing for its next voyage, its next collection of passengers seeking escape or adventure or transformation. But she no longer needed escape. She no longer needed the dramatic setting of a cruise ship or the heightened emotions of a revenge plot. She just needed the man sitting beside her, and the promise of a future they would build together, one honest day at a time. The cruise was over. Their real story was just beginning. And as the miles rolled by beneath their wheels, Vivian found herself genuinely excited to discover what that story would look like when it was written not in the pages of revenge or drama, but in the quiet moments of ordinary love lived authentically. Behind them, the ocean majesty disappeared into the distance, carrying its secrets and its stories toward the next port of call. But Vivian and Robert were no longer passengers in someone else's narrative. They were the authors of their own love story now. And they were ready to write a beautiful ending to the most dramatic chapter of their lives, and an even more beautiful beginning to everything that came next. 6 months later, Vivian stood in the kitchen of the small apartment she and Robert had found in Lincoln Park, watching the snow fall outside while she prepared dinner. The space was nothing like the elegant townhouse she had shared with Jonathan, smaller, less prestigious, with mismatched furniture and walls that still needed painting. But it was theirs, built from their choices, filled with their shared laughter and quiet conversations, decorated with photographs from the life they were building together rather than artifacts from lives they were trying to forget. Something smells incredible, Robert said, appearing in the doorway with his laptop under his arm. He looked tired but content, the expression of a man who had spent the day doing work that mattered with people he respected. How was your first day at the new firm? Vivian asked, turning to face him. After the divorce, Robert had left his high-powered investment company to join a smaller firm that specialized in ethical investing. The pay was less, the prestige minimal, but he came home energized rather than drained. Challenging. Exciting. Real. He set down his laptop and moved to wrap his arms around her from behind. I spent the day helping a nonprofit figure out how to grow their endowment without compromising their values. It felt like actually making a difference. Vivian leaned back against his chest, marveling at how natural this still felt after months of shared domesticity. Any word from Emma and Jake? Robert's expression grew more complex. The custody arrangement had been difficult to negotiate. Diana had initially tried to restrict Robert's access to the children, claiming that his impulsive behavior made him an unfit father. But the family court judge had been more interested in Robert's consistent presence and financial stability than in the circumstances that had ended his marriage. Emma texted me today, he said. She wants to know if she can bring a friend when she visits next weekend. That's good, right? That means she's comfortable here, comfortable with us? It means she's 14 and practical. She's figured out that fighting the new reality won't change it, so she might as well make the best of it. Vivian turned in his arms. And Jake? Jake is still processing. He's polite when he's here, but distant. I think he's waiting to see if this is permanent or just another disruption in his life. The pain in Robert's voice was real. His relationship with his children was the casualty he felt most deeply, the price of his choices that kept him awake some nights. They'll come around, Vivian said softly. Children are more resilient than we think. And eventually they'll see that you're happier, more present, more yourself when you're living authentically. And if they don't, then you'll keep loving them anyway. And you'll trust that someday they'll understand that you chose truth over comfortable lies, not just for yourself, but as an example for them. Robert kissed the top of her head. What about you? Any word from Jonathan? Vivian's divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago, a process that had been surprisingly straightforward once Jonathan realized that fighting her would only result in more public exposure of his affair. The papers for the house sale were signed today. It's officially sold. How do you feel about that? Vivian considered the question. The townhouse on Maple Street had been her home for 15 years. The place where she had tried to build a perfect life with a man who had never really seen her. Relieved, she said finally. That house was beautiful, but it was never really mine. It was the setting for the life I thought I wanted, not the life that actually made me happy. Any regrets? About the house? No. About the money we'll lose in the divorce settlements? No. About the friends who chose sides and decided we were the villains? Sometimes. But not enough to wish we had made different choices. They had lost friends, it was true. Some people couldn't understand how a relationship that began with such drama could be genuine. Others were uncomfortable with the moral ambiguity of their story, the way it complicated neat narratives about marriage and fidelity and appropriate behavior. But they had also discovered which relationships were strong enough to weather complexity, which friends loved them enough to accept that sometimes good people make choices that look bad from the outside. Speaking of friends, Vivian said, stirring the sauce on the stove, Claire called today. She wants to invite us to Sunday dinner this week. All of us? Even the kids. Especially the kids. She said it's time Emma and Jake had a chance to see us in a normal family setting, not just the awkwardness of custody transitions. Robert smiled. I like your sister. You like that she threatened to make your life difficult if you hurt me. I like that she followed through on getting to know me despite her initial skepticism. I like that she's protective of you. And I like that she's not afraid to call me out when she thinks I'm being an idiot. Vivian laughed. When have you been an idiot? Last week when I suggested we should send Emma and Jake postcards from our anniversary trip to Miami. Claire pointed out that sending souvenirs from the city where we met and fell in love might not be the most sensitive approach to building relationships with my children. She was right. She was absolutely right. Which is why I bought them books instead. Age-appropriate books about blended families, and how divorce doesn't mean their father loves them any less. Vivian turned to face him fully, struck by how much thought he put into every interaction with Emma and Jake. Jonathan had never been this intentional about anything in their relationship. You're a good father, Robert. Even in this impossible situation, even when they're angry and confused, you're thinking about what they need instead of what would be easier for you. I don't feel like a good father. I feel like a man who blew up his children's sense of stability because he fell in love with someone else. You feel like a man who chose authenticity over pretense. Your children may not understand that now, but someday they'll be adults facing their own complicated choices, and they'll remember that their father was brave enough to pursue happiness even when it was difficult. Robert was quiet for a moment, then smiled. When did you become so wise about parenting? You don't have children of your own. I have yours now, and I'm learning that loving someone means loving all the complicated parts of their life, including the parts that hurt. And how is that? Being a stepmother to children who aren't sure they want you in their lives. Vivian considered the question honestly. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than leaving Jonathan. Harder than facing the social judgment. Harder than starting over at 38. Because with Emma and Jake, I can't just decide to love them and have that be enough. I have to earn their trust, their acceptance, their affection. And I might fail. Are you sorry you signed up for this? Never. Because they're part of you, and I love all of you. Because they're good kids who are dealing with something impossible as best they can. And because I think someday, when they're older, they might be glad to have another adult in their lives who loves their father completely. The timer on the oven chimed, and Vivian pulled out the lasagna she had been preparing. It was one of Robert's favorites, a recipe she had learned from his mother during one awkward but necessary visit designed to introduce her to the family she was joining. Perfect timing, Robert said, setting the table with the dishes they had bought together at a discount store, choosing function over form, building their domestic life from scratch. As they sat down to dinner, Vivian felt the same sense of rightness she had experienced that first morning on the cruise ship balcony. This was what happiness looked like. Not the grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but the quiet satisfaction of sharing a meal with someone who knew her completely and chose her anyway. "Vivian," Robert said as they finished eating, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "What's that?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Vivian's breath caught. "I know this is unconventional," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I know we met under dramatic circumstances and moved quickly, and that some people will always question whether what we have is real. But I don't want to wait for social approval or perfect timing or the right moment." He got down on one knee beside her chair. "Vivian Palmer, you are the bravest, most authentic, most beautiful person I have ever known. You saved me from a life I was dying in, and you gave me the courage to become the man I was always meant to be. Will you marry me?" Vivian looked at the ring, at Robert's hopeful face, at the life they had built together in this small apartment with its mismatched furniture and unpainted walls. 6 months ago, she had been Vivian Palmer, the perfect wife living a perfect lie. Now she was someone she barely recognized, a woman who had chosen truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, real love over social acceptability. "Yes," she said, and the word came out as barely a whisper. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you. Yes, I want to face whatever comes next as your partner, your equal, your wife." Robert slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" "I asked Claire. She said you and she were the same size, and she gave me one of her rings to take to the jeweler." Vivian laughed, wiping tears from her eyes. "You conspired with my sister." "I conspired with your sister. I wanted to make sure that when I did this, I did it right. I wanted to make sure you knew that this isn't impulsive or dramatic or a reaction to everything that happened on the cruise. This is me 6 months later, having lived with you and loved you and discovered that you're even more remarkable in ordinary circumstances than you were in extraordinary ones." Vivian stood and kissed him, tasting salt from her own tears. "I love you, Robert Sweeney. I love the life we're building together. I love how hard you're trying with Emma and Jake. I love how you make coffee exactly the way I like it without being asked. I love how you listen to me talk about going back to nursing school without trying to talk me out of it. Are you really thinking about going back to school?" "I'm really thinking about going back to school. I want to finish what I started before I got married. I want to use my skills to help people. I want to have a career that's mine, not just a role in someone else's story." Robert spun her around in their small kitchen, both of them laughing. "We're going to be okay," he said. "Whatever anyone else thinks, whatever challenges we face, we're going to be okay." "How can you be so sure?" "Because we've already survived the worst of it. We've survived the betrayal and the public judgment and the guilt and the complicated logistics of divorcing other people and blending families and starting over. If we can get through all of that and still choose each other every day, we can get through anything." Later that evening, they called Claire with the news, then Emma and Jake, then Robert's parents. The reactions were mixed. Joy from Claire, cautious congratulations from the children, polite acceptance from Robert's family. But Vivian found that she cared less about other people's approval than she once had. The woman who had spent 15 years trying to be perfect had been replaced by someone who valued authenticity over applause. "One more call to make," Robert said as they sat on their small couch, Vivian's head on his shoulder, her new ring catching the light from the lamp they had bought together. "Who?" "Captain Morrison. He sent me a card when our divorces were finalized, said he'd been following our story and wanted to know how we were doing." Vivian smiled. "He was kind to us that night. Even when Diana was trying to cause trouble, he handled it with grace." Robert found the captain's number and dialed, putting the phone on speaker. "Captain Morrison? This is Robert Sweeney, from the Ocean Majesty cruise last spring." "Robert, how wonderful to hear from you. How are you and Vivian doing?" "We're doing very well, Captain. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Vivian and I are engaged." There was a pause, then a warm chuckle. "That's the best news I've heard all week. You know, in 30 years of captaining cruise ships, I've seen a lot of vacation romances. Most of them don't survive the transition back to real life. But I had a feeling about you too." "Really? Really? You had something that went deeper than the drama and the revenge and the hurt feelings. You had genuine respect for each other. That's rarer than you might think, especially in circumstances like yours. Vivian leaned closer to the phone. Captain, this is Vivian. I wanted to thank you for how you handled that night in the dining room. You could have thrown us off the ship, could have made a terrible situation even worse. My dear, I've been at sea long enough to know that sometimes people have to go through storms to find their true course. You were both in a storm, but you were navigating it together. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. Will you marry us? Robert asked suddenly. Vivian looked at him in surprise. What? Captain Morrison, would you be willing to officiate our wedding? I know it's unconventional, but this all started on your ship. It seems fitting that you should be the one to make it official. Another pause, then laughter. I would be honored. Absolutely honored. When are you thinking? Vivian and Robert looked at each other. Soon, Vivian said. We don't want a big wedding, don't need months of planning. We just want to make it official, to commit to each other in front of the people who matter most. Next month, Robert suggested. On the anniversary of the day we met? Perfect, Captain Morrison said. I'll check my schedule, but I think I can arrange to be in Chicago for a few days. We'll make it a proper ceremony, small but meaningful. After they hung up, Vivian and Robert sat in comfortable silence, processing the enormity of what they had just planned. Are you sure about this? Robert asked. A wedding so soon after our divorces, with everything still so complicated with the children? I'm sure, Vivian said without hesitation. I don't want to wait for perfect timing or social approval. I don't want to give anyone time to talk us out of what we know is right. I want to be your wife, Robert. Officially, legally, completely. Even if Emma and Jake aren't ready for it. Especially if Emma and Jake aren't ready for it. Because they need to see that commitment isn't conditional. That love isn't something that disappears when things get difficult. They need to see that when two people find something real, they fight for it. Robert kissed her forehead. How did I get so lucky? We both got lucky. We got lucky that Jonathan made a mistake with that text message. We got lucky that we found each other at exactly the moment we needed to. We got lucky that we were brave enough to choose each other over the lives we thought we wanted. Vivian looked around their small apartment, at the books stacked on improvised shelves, at the photographs of their new life together, at the simple evidence of two people building something real from nothing. You know what I realized today? What? I'm happier in this cramped apartment with second-hand furniture than I ever was in that perfect townhouse with perfect everything. Because this is ours. We chose every piece, we earned every inch. We built this life together from the ground up. No regrets about the life you left behind? Vivian considered the question one final time. I regret that people got hurt. I regret that Emma and Jake had to go through their parents' divorce. I regret that some friendships didn't survive our choices. But do I regret choosing authenticity over pretense? Do I regret choosing you over Jonathan? Do I regret becoming the kind of person who fights for what she wants instead of settling for what's convenient? She looked at her engagement ring, then at the man who had asked her to share his complicated, messy, authentic life. Never. Not for a single moment. Outside their window, Chicago hummed with its eternal energy, full of people making mistakes and finding love and discovering that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing that ever happens to you. Inside their small corner of the world, two people who had found each other in the middle of betrayal and revenge had built something neither of them had been looking for. A love worth the cost of everything they had given up to find it.